Chapter 362. What he wanted Lu Yi to see wasn't this magnificent sea of flowers that swayed with the wind, but rather, there was a huge, bone-white object in the middle of the sea of flowers, as if it was made of white jade. Even though Lu Yi was mentally prepared, when she saw this thing, she couldn't help but suck in a breath of cold air. Among the endless colorful flowers, this thing that looked like it was made of white jade was particularly eye-catching. A beehive, an extremely huge beehive. It was like a huge palace standing in the center of the valley. Such a huge beehive was unheard of. In the endless sea of flowers in the valley, there were wasps that were 1 to 2 feet long flying around. Looking at the size of the wasps and the colorful patterns on their bodies, the corner of Lu Ye's eyes twitched. The wasps they had encountered before were only 2 to 3 inches long and were considered very ordinary wasps. However, the wasps in this sea of flowers could already be classified as demon wasps. What was even more frightening was the number of these demon wasps. It was frightening. The honey produced in those ordinary beehives was already coveted. What would the honey produced in this beehive be like? Lu Yi could not help but think. No wonder people said that there were often natural treasures in the deep mountains and forests. Many cultivators liked to explore the mountains after they had a certain cultivation foundation and often found some good things. The beehive in his field of vision was a natural treasure. Although it was true that he had to take some risks to get the honey in the beehive, he had to pay for it to reap the rewards. After thinking for a while, Lu Yi instructed, "Wait for me here. I'll go take a look." Yi immediately said, "I'll go with you." In fact, Yi was more suitable for this kind of adventure than him because she was a spirit body. Even if she encountered any danger, she could directly escape underground. This was something that no cultivator could compare to. However, this did not mean that Yi would never be in danger. The beehive did not look normal. In addition, there were countless huge demon wasps in the valley. How could Lu Yi let Yi take the risk? If he went alone, even if he encountered danger, he had some confidence that he could escape. Yi pouted her lips, looking unhappy. Lu Yi ignored her and leaped down towards the bottom of the valley. In midair, she had already activated the concealment spirit rune to cover her body. In an instant, his figure disappeared, and even his aura was completely restrained. If he hadn't obtained the concealment spirit rune from the talent tree, Lu Yi wouldn't have dared to do such a thing. The 1-foot-long bees didn't look like they were easy to deal with. Lu Yi didn't care about dozens or hundreds of them, but there were more than dozens or hundreds of them in the sea of flowers. Looking down from the sky, the sea of flowers was undulating. Only when he landed did he realize that the flowers and plants here were abnormally tall. Lu Yi didn't know much about pharmacology, so he didn't know if these flowers and plants were medicinal herbs. The concealment spirit rune was maintained, and Lu Yi moved forward silently. From time to time, some demonic bees would fly past him, and his ears would buzz incessantly. After walking for a long time, they finally reached the beehive. Standing in front of the beehive and looking up, Lu Yi felt tiny and insignificant. There were many holes around the beehive, and many diligent demon bees went in and out. Lu Yi searched for a while, then found a relatively large hole and went in. But not long after, a wasp crawled out of the hole. Lu Yi hurriedly shrank his body and stuck close to the side. When the demon bee crawled past him, it seemed to have sensed something. It turned its head and looked in his direction. When it didn't find anything unusual, it continued crawling forward. Along the way, he brushed past many demon bees. The concealment spirit rune's effect was unexpectedly good. These demon bees with low intelligence probably wouldn't have thought that someone would be so bold as to come to their beehive. Not long after, Lu Yi passed through the tunnel and entered the interior of the beehive. The space inside the beehive was obviously larger, and it was filled with the unique fragrance of honey. Just smelling the fragrance was enough to make one feel relaxed and happy. Lu Yi was increasingly certain that the honey produced in this beehive was definitely not comparable to the ones he had harvested before. If the honey was divided into quality, then the ones he had harvested before were undoubtedly inferior, and the ones here were superior. There were even more demon bees in the beehive. Lu Yi had to avoid the demon bees coming and going from time to time as he followed the sweet smell and continued forward. Soon he found the storage place of the honey. Pieces of pure golden honey were clustered in the interior of the beehive like topaz. Just the smell of it was enough to make one's appetite whet. There were more than a dozen demon bees that were almost the length of a human body guarding the surroundings, crawling back and forth. These guys were much larger than the demon bees outside, and they didn't look like they were to be trifled with. Lu Yi also found something that looked like a groove at the side. The reason why he saw it was mainly because there were a few demon bees that were the length of a human body guarding it. Lu Yi quietly went forward and looked at the groove. His expression changed slightly. The groove wasn't big, only about the size of a bowl. The groove stored about half a bowl's worth of amber golden syrup. Lu Yi wasn't sure what it was, but he felt that it might be the royal jelly of the beehive. It was undeniable that this half a bowl of syrup was much more valuable than the honey. Now that he had found the good stuff, it was time to think of a way to take it away. After thinking for a moment, Lu Yi reached into his storage pouch and took out a few spirit stones. With a flick of his finger, he sent the spirit stones flying in all directions. The abnormal movement alerted the patrolling hornets. The hornets crawled towards the source of the movement at an extremely fast speed. In the blink of an eye, only the demon bees guarding the royal jelly were left. These demon bees were much more conscientious and didn't seem like they would easily leave their original positions. With no other choice, Lu Yi could only circulate his spirit power. When the weapon box buzzed, 9 streaks of light shot out. With a swishing sound, the demon bees standing still were all decapitated. With this, Lu Yi's figure could no longer be hidden. However, he couldn't care less at this time. He hurriedly circulated his spirit power and wrapped up the amber syrup in the groove, directly putting it into an empty storage pouch. Then, he rushed to the side and wantonly collected the golden crystal-like honey. With a buzzing sound, the demon bees that had been lured away retreated and quickly rushed towards Lu Yi. A moment later, a fiery red streak of light broke through the hive's blockade and soared into the sky. It was Lu Yi, who had activated the flying wing tattoo to escape. At this moment, Lu Yi was in an extremely sorry state. He grimaced in pain as he was wrapped in a stream of light. There were at least a dozen stingers on his body. Each stinger was half a foot long and pierced into his body like sharp blades. Not only that, but the stingers were also highly toxic. Lu Yi clearly felt that his body was somewhat uncoordinated and became very stiff. Even his thoughts were somewhat sluggish. If an ordinary cultivator were to encounter such a situation, they would probably only be able to wait for death. Not to mention other things, just the poison in the stingers was not something a spirit stream realm cultivator could resist. Not to mention, there was a large swarm of demon bees chasing after Lu Yi. Even the demon bees that were collecting honey in the valley were alarmed. On the mountain rock, giant armor, and he watched as a gray fog rose above the sea of flowers. Millions or even tens of millions of demon bees chased after Lu Yi's figure. The scene was so spectacular that it was horrifying. Yi's mind was immediately thrown into chaos. She leaped and was about to chase after Lu Yi when she sensed a movement from the battlefield imprint. She quickly checked and found that it was Lu Yi who sent a message. "Run!" Yi stopped and called out to Giant Armor. She turned around and went deep into the forest. In the sky, Lu Yi felt a little better. With the innate skill tree's ability to burn the poison, he was not worried that he would be poisoned to death. However, some reactions were inevitable. The buzzing sound in his ears was almost continuous. Lu Yi looked back and was shocked. This time, he really poked a hornet's nest. The demon bees behind him chased after him like a thick black cloud. Lu Yi did not care about pulling out the stingers on his body. He madly urged his spirit force and flapped his wings, quickly flying into the sky. In an instant, he broke through the sea of clouds that sealed the entire hidden fog mountain. The dazzling sunlight spread out, causing Lu Yi to squint slightly. "Lu Yi!" Someone suddenly shouted. Lu Yi looked in the direction of the voice and saw more than a dozen streaks of light rushing towards him. In the distance, there were even more streaks of light approaching after hearing the voice. The Leaf Eradication League, led by Qin Zheng, had been chasing Lu Yi for the past few days. How could they not guard against Lu Yi's escape? Therefore, not only were there a large number of people chasing after Lu Yi's whereabouts in the forest, but there were also people patrolling the sky at all times. The field of vision in the air was very wide. Lu Yi had only just revealed himself when he was discovered by the Leaf Eradication League. In an instant, those cultivators were like cats that had smelled blood, and they all gathered in this direction. However, what puzzled them was that Lu Yi seemed to be in a sorry state at the moment. There were more than a dozen needle-like things stuck in his body. They did not know what he had encountered. What puzzled them even more was that when Lu Yi saw them, not only did he not dodge, but he also met them head-on. "How dare you!" The leader shouted angrily. He raised his hand and summoned a flying tool to attack Lu Yi. Lu Yi's flying skills were not as good as giant armors, but at this moment, he was not flying on a flying tool. Instead, he was using the Flying Wing Spirit Tattoo. Compared to flying on a flying tool, the speed of the Flying Wing Spirit Tattoo was undoubtedly faster and more flexible. Facing the streaks of light in front of him, Lu Yi's figure moved nimbly. While avoiding the attacks, the distance between them quickly closed. "Be careful!" the leader shouted. They had all heard of Lu Yi's methods, so after getting close to each other, they immediately spread out and were on guard. Unexpectedly, Lu Yi did not intend to attack them. He brushed past them and flew straight into the distance. Chapter 363. Seeing Lu Yi fleeing in panic, all the cultivators except for the Yi Alliance were somewhat confused. Before they could turn around, they heard a buzzing sound in their ears. Someone immediately asked, "What's that sound?" As soon as they spoke, their eyes filled with fear. Where Lu Yi appeared, the clouds churned and wriggled as if something was about to break out. Accompanied by a continuous buzzing sound, their field of vision was filled with a large swarm of wasps. The cultivators from the Leaves League felt their scalps go numb. They finally understood why Lu Yi was running so fast. This guy had somehow provoked a swarm of wasps and was now being chased down. The wasps were extremely fast. As soon as they appeared, they were already in front of them. The cultivators from the Leaves League hurriedly circulated their spirit energy to protect themselves and hurriedly descended. However, they were still a bit too late. Surrounded by the wasps, their protective spirit energy quickly dissipated and they were stung by the stingers. They screamed as they fell from the sky. Wherever the wasps passed, the dozen or so cultivators from the Leaves League disappeared. When the cultivators who were rushing over from afar saw this, they were all greatly shocked and stopped in their tracks. They watched as the dark cloud formed by the demon bees flew away. It was only now that Lu Yi had the time to pull out the stingers from his body. Every time he pulled out a stinger, it brought with it a spray of blood. These stingers were very long and had penetrated deep into his flesh. Fortunately, they didn't injure his vitals. After pulling out a dozen stingers, Lu Yi looked back and saw that the swarm of wasps behind him was like maggots that couldn't be shaken off. What made him feel even more helpless was that these wasps were even faster than his normal flying speed. Fortunately, he was using the Flying Wing Spirit Tattoo, so as long as he had a bit of time, he would be able to shake off the swarm of wasps. It was scary but not dangerous. Just as he was thinking this, a strange feeling came from the Flying Wing Tattoo on his back. When he circulated his spirit energy, it became somewhat sluggish. Lu Yi's expression turned grave. He realized that he was in trouble. This Flying Wing Tattoo was something that Madame Yun had personally inscribed on him before he had participated in the Battle of Lingxi. Back then, Madame Yun had said that this temporary tattoo could only last for a total of 6 hours. In other words, after this time, the tattoo would lose its effect. After such a long period of time, Lu Yi had been using the Flying Wing Tattoo on and off, and the time added together was almost up. Yang Kai himself was faintly aware of this, so after breaking through to the 8th Order and being able to use Imperial Flying Artifact, he rarely used his Flying Wing Tattoo unless it was absolutely necessary. After all, it could be used to save his life at a critical moment. But he didn't expect that at this juncture today, the Flying Wing Tattoos would reach their limit. Left with no choice, Lu Yi could only summon his spirit boat and switch to flight mode before the Flying Wing Tattoo lost its effect. Only by activating the Flight Spirit rune on his spirit boat could he barely maintain his previous speed. He took out a few spirit pills and stuffed them into his mouth. Then he took out a bottle of resting fruit wine and drank it. The spirit chi in his body was quickly restored. Using the flying wing inscription consumed a lot of spirit power. At this moment, maintaining the wind travel spirit inscription on the spirit boat consumed a lot of spirit power. Therefore, Lu Yi had to ensure that his spirit power could last. As they chased and fled, they kept moving forward. After an hour, Lu Yi finally shook off the swarm of bees behind him. He let out a long sigh, stopped flying, and found a safe place to rest. While Lu Yi was resting, the cultivators of the Leaves Union received the news that Lu Yi was being chased by a swarm of bees and had escaped. This made the cultivators of the Leaves Union very angry. They had been chasing Lu Yi for so many days in the hidden fog mountain and had lost hundreds of people, but in the end, Lu Yi still managed to escape. How could they be willing to accept this? Although they didn't know why Lu Yi was being chased by a swarm of bees, that guy had many tricks up his sleeve and his imperial flying artifact flying speed, so there was a high chance that he could escape safely. Now that the Leaves Union had lost track of Lu Yi, there was no need to continue the chase. After communicating with each other for a while, they had no choice but to accept the result of this operation's failure. Streams of light soared into the sky and shuttled through the fog sea, preparing to leave. However, at that moment, another piece of news came. Lu Yi was running back with the swarm of bees behind him. The cultivators who encountered him couldn't avoid him and lost more than a dozen people. It could be said that they were in an extremely sorry state. The cultivators of the Leaves Union were dumbfounded. They really didn't know how Lu Yi had provoked the swarm of bees to chase after him so relentlessly. However, this was a good thing for them. Originally, they were the only ones chasing Lu Yi, but now they had a swarm of bees to help them. This made the cultivators of the Leaves Union very happy, and they all sighed with emotion. Although they had lost some people to the swarm of bees, they had lost a lot of people during this time. As long as they could kill Lu Yi, their previous losses would be worth it. After a simple discussion, the cultivators of the Leaves Union, who were about to leave, decided to stay. Even if they couldn't kill Lu Yi with their own hands, they wanted to see him die. If they could cooperate with the swarm of bees, it would be even better. At this moment, Lu Yi was really speechless. Perhaps it was because he had killed some bees in the hive before, or perhaps there was some undetectable aura left on his body, but even though he had shaken off the swarm of bees before, he hadn't rested for a moment before the swarm of bees chased after him again. While escaping, Lu Yi changed his clothes from inside to outside and even washed his body several times with water, but he still couldn't completely shake off the swarm of bees. If he could continue to enchant the spirit boat with flight spirit runes, Lu Yi had some confidence that he could shake off the swarm of bees. However, even if he was already a Heaven Grade 7 cultivator, he couldn't bear such consumption. Enchantment of a spirit boat consumed a lot of spiritual energy, even more than when he activated the flight spirit runes. With his spiritual energy reserves, he couldn't maintain it for a long time. Since he couldn't shake off the swarm of bees by flying, Lu Yi could only turn back. He wanted to borrow the hands of the myriad Devil Ridge cultivators to block the swarm of bees and cause some damage to them, but it couldn't change the current situation. Helpless, he could only fly through the dense forest, using the natural barrier of the forest to slow down the swarm of bees. While running, he suddenly encountered a group of myriad Devil Ridge cultivators. The moment they met, both sides were startled. However, Lu Yi quickly took out an item from his storage bag and threw it at the other party. It was a 3-meter-wide hive. Someone attacked and blew up the hive. A sweet fragrance immediately spread out, and the fragments of the hive flew in all directions. Smelling the sweet fragrance, many of the myriad Devil Ridge cultivators' expressions changed, and they gradually became frightened. Everyone knew that Lu Yi was being chased by a swarm of bees. Originally, if they met here, as long as they could delay Lu Yi's escape speed, the swarm of bees would catch up and Lu Yi would be in danger. No one expected that he would throw out a hive first. A buzzing sound quickly approached Lu Yi from behind. When he looked up, he saw a dense dark cloud between the trees. Lu Yi, who had thrown out the hive, had already escaped from the side, leaving them to face the terror of the swarm of bees. "Run!" Someone shouted and immediately took out his flying spirit boat and soared into the sky. There were also people who turned around and ran back. For a moment, the scene was chaotic. The swarm of wasps chasing after Lu Yi suddenly split into several groups. Most of the wasps continued to chase after Lu Yi like maggots, while the few that split off went after the fleeing myriad demons ridge cultivators. A moment later, miserable screams rang out. Not only were the fleeing myriad devil ridge cultivators unable to escape, but even the cultivators flying in the air were caught by the bees. With the strength of the core cultivators, dozens or hundreds of these bees wouldn't pose any threat to them. However, if there were too many of them, it would be difficult for them to resist. Once the protective spirit boat and spirit power were broken, the stingers would pierce into the body, and the bee venom would seep into the body. The fleeing Lu Ye's eyes suddenly lit up. When he was being chased by the swarm of bees, he had been thinking about a question. How did these bees find his location? He had changed his clothes and washed his body clean. All that was left was an aura that he couldn't detect, such as the unique sweetness of honey. When plundering the golden honey in the beehive, it was inevitable that he would be contaminated with that aura. It was very difficult to remove this aura in a short period of time using normal methods. Throwing a beehive at the myriad devil ridge cultivators was just an experiment. Anyway, he had many of these ordinary beehives, so throwing one was nothing. However, the result surprised him. From the looks of it, being relentlessly chased by such a swarm of bees didn't seem to be a bad thing. There were more than 30 people in the myriad devil ridge team just now. Originally, he couldn't compete with them with his strength, but he could easily kill them with a borrowed knife. He just didn't know how many such teams there were. Lu Yi thought of Giant Beetle and Yi again. He quickly sent a message out, telling them to evacuate first and that he would find a chance to meet up with them later. These bees were really crazy now. It was very dangerous for Giant Beetle and the others to stay nearby. Not long after, Yi replied, telling him to be careful. Now that he didn't have to worry about Giant Beetle and Yi's safety, Lu Yi didn't have to worry about anything. Although traveling through the dense forest was much slower than flying on a magic tool, there were natural obstacles and barriers, so the situation was better than flying on a magic tool. However, he didn't dare to stop for even a moment. The situation suddenly became even more chaotic. In the hidden fog mountain, Lu Yi led the swarm of bees everywhere. Every myriad devil ridge team that encountered him suffered. After suffering several losses and losing hundreds of people, the cultivators of the Yi League had to admit that it was no longer suitable to stay. Otherwise, their losses would only be greater. Helpless and unwilling, the cultivators of the Yi League flew into the air and prepared to evacuate the hidden fog mountain. As for Lu Yi, they would let him fight with the swarm of bees and dogs. Being chased by such a swarm of bees, it was impossible for a Heaven Rank 7 cultivator to survive. Chapter 364. Less than half a day later, Lu Yi noticed that something was wrong. There seemed to be no cultivators from the myriad devil ridge in this area. Not only that, but even the monsters that originally lived here seemed to have sensed the danger and fled. The pursuit of the swarm was endless and relentless. If it weren't for Lu Ye's talent tree and gluttonous meal to continuously replenish his consumed spirit power, he wouldn't have been able to hold on. The honey that he had plundered from the huge beehive was a great help. The good-grade honey was more effective at recovering physical strength and spirit power than the previous inferior honey. At this time, he couldn't care less about whether he would be contaminated. If he didn't replenish his physical strength, he wouldn't be able to continue escaping. Lu Yi tried to fly several times, but even if he didn't care about the consumption of spirit power and continued to maintain the wind spirit tattoo, he could only temporarily shake off the swarm. Once he stopped for a moment, the swarm would quickly catch up. There was no end to it. Now, if he wanted to get rid of the swarm, he could only take an unconventional approach. The map showed that in the depths of the hidden fog mountain, there was a land of fire covering thousands of kilometers. The environment was extremely harsh and could be said to be one of the most dangerous places in the Spirit Stream battlefield. Logically speaking, such a harsh place should be barren, but in fact, although the land of fire was unbearably hot, there was no lack of vitality in the heat. As a result, although the land of fire wasn't lush, it wasn't a barren land either. Moreover, that place was rich in fire attribute spirit plants and minerals. When he first decided to enter the hidden fog mountain, Lu Yi discovered this land of fire. He thought that after dealing with the people from the myriad Devil Ridge who were chasing him, he would go to the land of fire to take a look. After all, the talent tree could devour ownerless things with scorching energy, so he might be able to gain something from the land of fire. Now that the cultivators from the myriad Devil Ridge were gone and a group of even more troublesome things was behind him, Lu Yi had no choice but to go to the land of fire. As long as the environment there was harsh enough, it could stop the swarm for him. Of course, the premise was that he could withstand it. However, he was a Heaven Rank 7 cultivator, and his physique was comparable to a body cultivator of the same rank. His endurance should be stronger than the swarm. After making a decision, Lu Yi followed the map and headed straight for the land of fire. During this period, he even tried to fly in the air several times in an attempt to shake off the swarm of bees behind him, but all of them ended in failure. After 2 days of walking and stopping, the tall trees disappeared from his field of vision. The vegetation was obviously much thinner, and there was a faint scorching heat flowing in the surrounding environment. They had arrived at the outskirts of the land of fire. Lu Yi had been on the run for the past 2 days, tormenting him greatly. Now that he had arrived at the land of fire and confirmed that the environment here was similar to what was recorded on the map, a glimmer of hope appeared in his heart. As they continued forward, the vegetation became even sparser. There were no natural barriers or obstructions, which caused the speed of the pursuing bees to increase greatly. Lu Yi had no choice but to summon his air transportation spiritual tool and fly a few meters above the ground. The further they went, the hotter the environment became. Even the ground began to dry up. However, it was indeed as recorded on the map. The scorching heat here was not the kind of scorching heat that had no vitality. Instead, it contained a strange vitality. If not for this, ordinary spiritual plants would not be able to survive in such an environment. There were rumors that there was a supreme treasure in the land of fire. This was the source of the strange environment here. Over the years, many cultivators had been attracted to the land of fire to search for treasures. However, they either returned empty-handed or their corpses were left to rot in the wilderness. One had to know that the land of fire was marked as a danger zone on the map sold by the Tianji Merchant Union. Any location marked as a danger zone was a forbidden zone for cultivators. The danger here didn't just come from the environment itself, but also from factors outside of the environment. For example, demon beasts. A special environment like the land of fire attracted many fire attribute demon beasts to live here. Many of them were very powerful, and ordinary cultivators were no match for them. For example, the fire lizard that Lu Yi encountered now. This thing crawled on the ground and blended in with its surroundings. It wasn't inferior to the most outstanding ghost cultivators. When Lu Yi flew across the sky, a long tongue popped out and stuck to the flying spirit boat. If Lu Yi hadn't reacted quickly and sent out several imperial weapons from the weapon box to slash down, the boat would have been torn down by the tongue. The fire lizard's tongue was very flexible. Lu Yi's weapon couldn't completely cut it off. After feeling the pain, the lizard opened its mouth and spat out raging flames. Lu Yi immediately flew up and hurriedly dodged. As a result, the bees chasing him were unlucky. Under the raging flames, at least a few dozen of them died. More and more fire lizards showed up in the vicinity. They spurted out balls of flame and swarms of demon bees fell down like raindrops. This scene made Lu Yi raise his eyebrows. The resentment in his heart over the past few days was finally alleviated. However, these bees weren't to be trifled with. The hundreds of Lu Yi Union cultivators that were stung to death by them were a lesson learned. These guys weren't very intelligent, but they were very vengeful. Lu Yi only went to the huge beehive to plunder some honey and royal jelly, but they chased him all the way here. The fire lizard actually dared to slaughter these bees. How could it have a good ending? The buzzing sounds became even more intense as the overwhelming number of demon wasps descended. The flames that they spat out were quickly extinguished. Accompanied by hissing sounds, the fire lizards revealed themselves one after another as they lay stiffly on the ground, twitching from time to time. After the bee swarm whistled past, only a dozen fire lizard corpses were left. Fire lizards were only demon beasts in the periphery and weren't very strong. The deeper one went, the more fire attribute demon beasts they encountered, and the stronger they were. These demon beasts usually stayed in their own territories and occasionally went out to hunt. No one would have thought that while they were sitting at home, disaster would come from the sky. Perhaps because they had suffered at the hands of the fire lizards, wherever the bees swarmed past, regardless of whether the demon beasts provoked them or not, they would be stung until their bodies swelled and they fell to the ground dead. For a time, the demon beasts in the land of fire suffered heavy casualties. It was unknown if they were affected by the scorching environment, but the bees seemed to have lost their minds at this moment and madly retaliated against all the creatures around them. Perhaps their simple intelligence had already realized that Lu Yi, the thief who had stolen their treasures, was about to escape. Half a day later, Lu Yi had already entered the depths of the land of fire. At this point, the surrounding heat was no longer something ordinary cultivators could withstand. The high temperature caused the surrounding environment to become extremely distorted, and the ground showed an abnormal dark red color. Lu Yi urged his spiritual power to protect his body, but he was still sweating profusely. The sweat evaporated as soon as it appeared, causing his clothes to become hard and stick to his body. It was extremely uncomfortable. This was the result of him having a Heaven Grade 7 cultivation base and cultivating a fire attribute cultivation method. If not for this, he would not have been able to hold on. At this time, the pursuing bees had also suffered heavy losses. Along the way, they were killed by the demon beasts they encountered along the way. The remaining bees seemed to have lost their vitality. Not to mention their speed was greatly reduced. Many of the weaker bees had already fallen behind. There were even more bees whose wings were damaged by the high temperature and fell to the ground. Then, their limbs were melted by the terrifying heat on the ground. After losing their vitality, they completely turned into fireballs. Lu Yi turned his head to look back and his heart settled. He knew that coming to the land of fire was the right choice. Otherwise, he really would not have been able to shake off this swarm of bees. After flying forward for a while, the pursuing movements behind him gradually subsided. Lu Yi looked back again and saw that the few remaining bees had stopped moving forward. Instead, they hovered in place and quietly looked at him. After a while, the remaining bees turned around and returned along the original path. Lu Yi watched them leave. He had finally shaken off this group of plagues. His heart relaxed as boundless exhaustion washed over him. The spirit boat that was hovering in the air swayed slightly. Lu Yi hurriedly took out some good quality honey from his storage bag to replenish his physical strength and spiritual energy. He also took out a few spirit pills and swallowed them. He did not retreat, nor did he continue forward. Lu Yi pressed down on the flying light and landed. After being chased for a few days, he did not have a good rest. Although the current environment was bad, at least he was not in a hurry to be chased. He could rest for a while and recover. The first reason why he did not retreat was that he was afraid that the swarm of bees would be guarding him outside. After getting rid of them with great difficulty, Lu Yi did not want to deal with them for the rest of his life. The second reason was the abnormality of the talent tree. Since half a day ago, he had faintly felt that the talent tree was a little strange. This feeling was very similar to when he used the talent tree to devour the earth core fire. Looking inside, he could even see that the talent tree that was rooted in his source aperture had grown some roots and was floating around. It looked like the talent tree wanted to devour something but could not find the place. This made Lu Yi certain that there was a fire attribute treasure in the land of fire. Moreover, it was a treasure that could be devoured by the talent tree. This was very attractive to Lu Yi. During these days, the earth core fire that the talent tree devoured was bought from the Tianji treasury by spending merit points. A portion of earth core fire was worth 200 merit points. For any cultivator, 200 merit points was not a small amount. Lu Yi had spent around 20,000 merit points on it. If he could find a fire attribute treasure that the talent tree could devour here, it would be equivalent to saving a lot of merit points for Lu Yi. This was naturally worth exploring. As time passed, Lu Yi slowly recovered. Moreover, the surrounding heat also lessened a lot. Lu Yi knew that it was not that the heat had lessened, but that he had slowly adapted to the environment here. His body had a certain degree of resistance to the environment here. He did not notice it before, mainly because he was going too deep. He had flown in using a tool. As he went deeper and deeper, the surrounding environment accelerated too quickly, causing his body to not be able to adapt in time. Now that he had stopped, this adaptability was slowly showing. Realizing this, Lu Yi gave up on the idea of using a tool to go deeper. Instead, he walked forward step by step. Chapter 365. The scorching sun hung high in the sky, covering an area of several thousand li in flames. Lu Yi took off his shirt, bare-chested, and walked forward step by step with the Pan Mountain saber in hand. He didn't use his spirit power to protect himself, allowing the scorching heat to corrode his body to increase his resistance to the harsh environment. At the same time, he could directly sense the limits of his body's endurance. Back when he was a slave miner in Evil Moon Valley, Lu Ye's body was still somewhat thin due to the intense labor and lack of food and clothing. However, after embarking on the path of cultivation, his physique slowly strengthened, especially after he obtained the scale armor in the Dragon Spring. The strengthening of his physique was visible to the naked eye. At this moment, his naked upper body was full of strong muscles and crisscross scars left behind by sharp weapons. These scars were the marks of his bloody battles with his enemies. In fact, after returning to the Jade Blood Sect from the Inner Circle for a month, his second senior sister had already used medical methods to remove the remaining scars on his body. However, cultivators often fought and killed others, so it was normal for new scars to appear after the old scars disappeared. Sweat slid down his spine and chest and quickly evaporated. Even a Heaven Grade 7 cultivator like Lu Yi needed to take out a water sack from time to time to replenish his body's water. He didn't walk very fast. This way, the surrounding environment could constantly temper his body and strengthen his body's resistance to the scorching heat. Therefore, even though he didn't walk very fast, he never stopped walking. Occasionally, he would stop and fight with the monster beasts he encountered along the way. The monster beasts that lived here were all fire attribute. They were attracted by the special environment because their growth rate here was much faster than in other places. The deeper he went, the stronger the monster beasts he encountered. Fortunately, Lu Yi didn't encounter any that were difficult to deal with. The Yao beasts killed were not wasted. The blood of the Yao beasts was collected properly. Some of the special parts of the Yao beasts could be used as materials for artifact forging. The fur of the Yao beasts could be sold. Even the flesh of the Yao beasts was a great supplement for cultivators. Who liked to eat these the most? Lu Yi contacted Yi and found out that Giant Beetle had taken her and Hooper out of Hidden Fog Mountain and was hiding in a secluded place. Lu Yi told them to be careful and to meet up with them once she was done with her business here. Night fell and the full moon rose into the sky. However, the Land of Fire did not change much because of the arrival of the night. It was still so hot and unbearable. He kept moving forward. On the morning of the third day after escaping from the swarm of bees, Lu Yi had already ventured deep into the Land of Fire. Judging from the map, he was less than 200 li away from the core of the Land of Fire. Even with Lu Ye's powerful physique, it was difficult for him to withstand the pressure. There was a limit to how much one could increase one's body's resistance to the scorching heat. Since last night, Lu Yi had been circulating his spiritual energy to protect himself, and only then was he able to barely make it this far. At this point, even with the protection of spiritual energy, it was difficult to continue forward. At this location, there were no longer any demonic beasts around. Even those fire attribute demonic beasts could not withstand the harsh environment here. The name of the ominous grounds, the Forbidden Zone for cultivators, was not just for show. This caused Lu Yi to be somewhat unwilling. If there really was a fire attribute treasure in the Land of Fire, it would definitely be in the center. If he was really too far away, he would not force it, but now he was less than 200 li away from the center. If he gave up here, all his previous perseverance would be in vain. However, he had indeed reached his limit. If he continued to persist, he would only be asking for trouble. He examined himself, wanting to see if there was anything he could use. After looking around, it seemed that the only thing he could use was his innate skill tree. The innate skill tree could devour fire attribute energy. If he could borrow its power, resisting the scorching heat here should not be a problem. But the key was that this thing was rooted in his source aperture. It seemed illusory yet not illusory, real yet not real. It would never appear, so how could he borrow its power? After thinking for a while, Lu Yi realized a problem. Since the environment here was so harsh, it meant that there was a lot of fire attribute spiritual energy here. It was just that it could not be seen with the naked eye. This was clearly within the range of the innate skill tree's ability to devour. Why would he need the innate skill tree to protect himself? As long as he urged the innate skill tree to devour the scorching heat around him, wouldn't it be fine? Thinking of this, Lu Yi suddenly realized that his understanding of the innate skill tree all this time seemed to have fallen into a misunderstanding. If this was really the case, then he would have a huge advantage when facing enemies who cultivated fire attribute cultivation methods in the future. With a thought, he urged the power of the innate skill tree. In the next instant, the roots of the innate skill tree in his source aperture suddenly increased by a lot. Then, they all disappeared, as if probing into an unknown space. Lu Yi vaguely sensed something and immediately urged the insight spirit rune to enhance his eyes. Looking down at his hands, the scene in his field of vision made him slightly startled. His field of vision enhanced by the insight spirit rune was different from normal vision. This was because the insight spirit rune could see some things that the naked eye could not see, such as the flow of spiritual energy. Under the enhancement of the insight spirit rune, the world Lu Yi saw was colorful. These were the brilliant colors of spiritual energy of various attributes. At this moment, the scene in his field of vision was fiery red. There were no other colors. This was because the fire attribute spiritual energy here was too rich. The spiritual energy flowing on his hands was also fiery red, mixed with a faint golden color. This was because Lu Ye's spiritual energy was mainly fire and supplemented by metal. However, on the spiritual energy flowing on his hands, there were countless root-like things that were constantly swaying with the flow of spiritual energy. Those roots were clearly the roots of the innate skill tree. Not only on his hands, but also everywhere in his field of vision. At first glance, Lu Yi looked like a furry humanoid monster. In the past, when he urged the innate skill tree to devour the core fire, Lu Yi really did not urge the insight spirit rune to observe. It was only now that he understood how the innate skill tree devoured the core fire. It obviously used his body as a transit, using the roots as a bridge. No wonder every time the innate skill tree devoured the core fire, he could not feel the heat of the core fire, even if he held it in his hands. This was because his hands were covered with invisible roots of the innate skill tree. The innate skill tree's devouring showed results. The surrounding heat quickly subsided, and the sudden change in the environment gave Lu Yi an unreal sense of coolness. Now that his thoughts were verified, Lu Yi took large strides forward. Urging the innate skill tree like this did not consume much spiritual energy, but it consumed a lot of spiritual energy. Lu Yi had already clearly felt this, so he had to speed up. It would not be good for him to drag it out for too long. After walking for a while and confirming that there were no problems, Lu Yi simply took out the spirit boat and flew forward. The speed of flying was much faster than walking, and dozens of miles were quickly passed. Lu Yi, who was flying in the air, suddenly stopped and stood on the spirit boat and looked down. On the dark red ground below, a figure was crawling obliquely. Her exquisite and graceful curves were curvaceous, and her snow-white skin formed an extremely sharp contrast with the dark red ground. She was only wearing a corset made of animal skin on her upper body and a short skirt made of animal skin on her lower body. Not only was her slender figure extremely beautiful, but it also gave people a sense of explosive power. There was actually someone here? Lu Yi was very surprised. Since yesterday, he had not even seen a single demonic beast, but he actually encountered a person here. She should not be dead yet because Lu Yi could feel her vitality. This person had probably also come to the land of fire to search for treasures. To be able to survive the harsh environment here, one could imagine how strong she was. However, looking at the other party's posture at this moment, it was obvious that she had reached her limit. Otherwise, it would be impossible for her to crawl here without moving. Just as Lu Yi was about to activate the Insight Spirit Rune to observe the other party's cultivation level, the woman suddenly straightened up, and a pair of red eyes coldly met Lu Yi's eyes. Lu Yi immediately felt that something was wrong. Without any hesitation, the spirit boat quickly rose into the air, and an afterimage swept below and landed not far away. The spirit boat shook slightly, almost throwing Lu Yi off. Lu Yi turned his head and looked to the side. The woman, who was crawling on the ground just now, was now on both hands and feet. Her body was burning with flame-like spirit energy, and her fiery red hair fluttered. She bared her teeth at Lu Yi, looking like a cheetah ready to pounce on its prey. The other party's violent spirit energy and dazzling spirit light gave Lu Yi a fright. He had not seen such a resplendent spirit light even on Feng Yuechan and Li Baxian. And the other party's spirit energy. It was not spirit energy, but boiling demonic energy. This woman was a demonic beast, and an overlord-level great demonic beast. A great sense of danger grew in his heart. Lu Yi's heart suddenly contracted, and a stabbing pain came from his chest. His powerful mind allowed him to sense where the other party was about to attack. Almost at the instant he sensed the danger, Lu Yi instinctively constructed a defensive spirit rune on his chest. His vision blurred, and the demoness, who was still on the ground, had already pounced in front of him. Her hand formed a claw and clawed at his heart. With a cracking sound, the sturdy defensive spirit rune was pierced by the sharp nails, and cracks appeared. Lu Yi could even feel the pain of the other party's sharp claws piercing his chest. If there was no defensive spirit rune to block this attack, his heart would definitely be dug out. At the same time, 9 streams of light shot out from the weapon box at Lu Yi's waist, attacking the demoness in front of him. The demoness withdrew her hand, and her body spun lightly. She did not make any movements, but while dodging all the attacks, her long leg was like a whip, lashing down in the air. Lu Yi unsheathed the Pan Mountain saber at his waist and slashed at the other party's leg whip with the double sharpness spirit rune. The saber slashed at empty air. The other party changed her move extremely quickly, probably because she sensed the sharpness of the saber. She changed from a whip to a kick at the last moment. Her speed was so fast that it was hard to react to. Chapter 366. The Banshee's kick landed on Lu Yi's chest, almost knocking him off the spirit boat. If Lu Yi didn't have a flying spiritual artifact, he would definitely die in the face of such an overlord-level great demon. Therefore, after suffering that kick, Lu Yi almost instinctively hooked his feet onto his spirit boat and flew out with the spirit boat. After stabilizing himself with great difficulty, Lu Yi hastily looked around, but didn't see the Banshee anywhere. Sensing danger from above, Lu Yi quickly looked up. With the scorching sun in the sky, the Banshee's figure quickly swooped down from above. The 9 spirit tools that flew out turned into streams of light and attacked the Banshee head-on. Accompanied by a series of clanking sounds, all the spirit tools were bounced off by the Banshee's claws. This scene caused Lu Yi's heart to palpitate. He truly understood the gap between himself and a powerful great demon. He had seen 2 overlord-level Yao beasts. One was Xiao Hui in the encampment, and the other was Yin Jiao he had encountered in the Sky Pillar sect's territory. However, regardless of whether it was Xiao Hui or Yin Jiao, Lu Yi had never fought them head-on. This Banshee was the first great demon beast he had ever faced. With his Tianqi cultivation, he had recently killed quite a few Sky Tier 9 cultivators. However, even Sky Tier 9 cultivators were nothing in front of a powerful great demon beast. The so-called Overlord level was an existence that could dominate the entire battlefield. This hasty encounter wasn't because the Banshee had ambushed him. She had clearly sensed someone approaching while resting and had attacked. Lu Yi felt that he was unlucky. If he hadn't been curious and ran back to investigate, he wouldn't have encountered such a situation. Facing the Banshee, Lu Yi had nowhere to run. He could only take a deep breath and raise his mountain-coiling saber. A streak of light flashed across the blade, increasing its sharpness. The straight stab. This was a stab Lu Yi made at the maximum distance possible. It was also a stab that contained all of his strength. He had high hopes for this stab. However, the Banshee only tilted her neck slightly, and the sharp edge of the mountain coiling blade left a bloody gash on her fair neck. Before Lu Yi could cut her, the banshee kicked her in the chest. Lu Ye's entire chest went numb. His body froze for a moment before crashing to the ground. The spirit boat under his feet could not withstand such a huge impact and broke apart. Boom! A crater appeared in the dark red ground, and Lu Yi crashed to the ground. This wasn't the end of it. The demoness pounced on him like a maggot, clawing at him. Dust flew into the air, and when the ground cracked, Lu Yi had already gotten up and fled. His legs were augmented by flying spirit tattoos, and his mouth and nose were full of blood. He had never been in such a sorry state before. The difference in strength was simply too great. He was no match for Zhang Xian at all. His air transportation spiritual artifact had also been destroyed. Lu Yi felt the aura of death chasing after him like an invisible beast. Gradually, the feeling of his life hanging by a thread disappeared. Lu Yi hastily turned his head to look back and found that the demoness was actually standing in the same place, quietly looking at him with those scarlet eyes. She didn't chase after him, and even nimbly retreated a few dozen meters, returning to the spot where Lu Yi had first discovered her. After confirming that the other party had no intention of pursuing him, Lu Yi breathed a sigh of relief. Soon, he realized that it wasn't that the other party didn't want to kill him, but that she couldn't. In the land of fire, the deeper one went, the more intense the environment became. With Lu Ye's strength, he could only reach a distance of 200 meters from the center. Although this demoness was an overlord-level existence, she also had her limits. Her current limit was her current position. If she went any deeper, even she wouldn't be able to withstand it. This was why she had retreated a few dozen meters. Realizing this, Lu Yi felt completely relieved. From a distance of nearly 100 meters, Lu Yi looked down at his chest. His heart was a bloody mess, having been pierced by the demoness' sharp claws. Fortunately, the wound wasn't deep, and his chest was slightly sunken. He raised his hand and pressed on it. His ribs hurt, most likely some bone fractures. The other party's kick was too powerful. Lu Yi sheathed the mountain plate saber beside him and put away the spirit artifacts in his weapon case. Then he took out a few healing pills and swallowed them. After adjusting his breathing for a while and confirming that he was fine, Lu Yi grabbed the mountain plate saber and walked toward the demoness. Compared to before, the demoness' scarlet eyes were much less malicious. Instead, they were filled with curiosity, as if she was wondering how this creature, who was much weaker than her, could withstand the harsh environment and walk further than her. She tilted her head and sized up Lu Yi, her eyes full of scrutiny. When he was about 60 meters away from the demoness, Lu Yi expressionlessly stared at her. In the next instant, his weapon case trembled, and 9 streaks of light shot toward the demoness. If the other party didn't dare to go too deep, then no matter how strong she was, she would still be a target. After seeing how nimble the demoness was, Lu Yi didn't dare to fight her in close combat. However, with the help of a spirit artifact, he didn't have to worry about this. After being beaten up for no reason and almost losing his life, how could Lu Yi just let it go? The 9 streaks of light arrived in front of the demoness at almost the same time. Under Lu Ye's precise control, they attacked from different angles. Then Lu Yi saw what it meant to move like lightning. The demoness didn't move at all. Her claws turned into a series of afterimages. After a series of clanging sounds, more than half of the 9 streaks of light were knocked away, not hurting the demoness at all. Not only that, but 3 spirit artifacts were caught in the demoness' hands. They struggled like living creatures, but they couldn't break free. The demoness seemed to have seen spirit artifacts for the first time. She looked down at the struggling objects in her hands. The corners of Lu Ye's eyes twitched. He could accept that the other party dodged or even knocked away his spirit artifacts. After all, she was an overlord-level existence. Her strength had reached the limit of what the spirit stream battlefield could accommodate. However, it was a little awkward to take away his 3 spirit artifacts like this. Under the other party's restraint, it was wishful thinking for Lu Yi to take back his spirit artifacts. Trying to steal a chicken only to end up losing the rice used to lure it. With a thought, the 3 spirit artifacts that the demoness was playing with flashed with brilliance, and explosive spirit inscriptions instantly formed. Since returning from the immortal Essence City, Lu Yi had been able to add spirit inscriptions to his spirit artifacts. However, he hadn't tried to add explosive spirit inscriptions to them. He had only used these spirit inscriptions as the core to set up an explosive array before. The demoness' perception was undoubtedly very sharp. Just as the explosive spirit inscriptions formed, she raised her hand and threw the 3 spirit artifacts out. With 3 loud bangs, the 3 spirit artifacts lost most of their spirituality. Their luster dimmed, and their internal restrictions were destroyed. They lost their original functions. Lu Yi did a quick calculation. Ever since he had met this demoness, he had lost a spirit boat and 3 imperial weapons. He had even been beaten to the point of having his bones broken. What a loss! Without any hesitation, he turned around and left. The difference in strength was too great. Lu Yi had already given up on killing the demoness. The Heavenly Secret Business Alliance had caused him a lot of trouble. The map clearly stated that there were only 3 Overlord-level demonic beasts in the hidden Fog Mountain. However, there was a 4th one in the Land of Fire. This was obviously a mistake in the information. It definitely wasn't his fault. Wait! The demoness suddenly spoke. Her voice was a little hoarse, but there was a hint of charm in it. Lu Yi was a little surprised. He didn't expect her to be able to speak. This demoness wasn't a demonic cultivator. Lu Yi had specially observed her before. She didn't have any spirit artifacts, nor did she have any signs of cultivation. She fought with her instincts and demonic energy. Real demonic cultivators were different from her. Demonic cultivators lived in perfect harmony with the human clan. They took the path of enlightened apertures cultivation. Many sects had demonic cultivators as disciples. They were no different from the human clan except for some slight differences in appearance. This demoness could be seen as a demonic cultivator. Demonic cultivators were different from demonic cultivators. The former's life and cultivation were more primitive, similar to demonic beasts. Lu Yi didn't know what the demoness' true form was because there weren't many traces of demonic cultivation left on her. However, judging from her nimble body, her true form shouldn't be too big. During the battle, the demoness didn't speak and was so curious about the spirit artifacts. Lu Yi thought she hadn't come into contact with humans. Now, it seemed that wasn't the case. At least she could speak. Lu Yi stopped and turned around to look back. Their eyes met. The demoness spoke again. "Bring me the thing inside." "What's inside?" "A ball of fire. I can feel it. It's a very powerful ball of fire." From the looks of it, the demoness also wanted to enter the center of the Land of Fire to search for the legendary fire-type treasure. Although she was unable to reach the center with her strength, she could still feel the existence of the ball of fire. A treasure that even an overlord-level existence coveted couldn't be bad. Li thought of Ying Jiao. Ying Jiao was extremely eager for his scales. It seemed that the ball of fire in the depths of the Land of Fire was as useful to the demoness as the scales were to Ying Jiao. He turned around and continued moving forward. "I'll wait for you here." The demoness' voice came from behind. Lu Yi pretended not to hear it. He had traveled a long way here for the same goal as the demoness. Not only did she beat him up, but she also wanted him to bring the thing out to her. She must be dreaming. A ball of fire. It looked like that ball of fire was the source of this Land of Fire. Lu Yi was very curious. Just what kind of ball of fire was it that could turn an area of thousands of miles into such a dangerous place? While moving forward, Lu Yi rummaged through his storage bag. His original spirit boat had been destroyed, so he had to quickly refine another flight-type spirit artifact. The previous spirit boat was obtained from sky-bearing sects Yuan Guang. Yuan Guang was only an ordinary 9th order cultivator, so the quality of his spirit boat was mediocre. Recently, Lu Yi had killed so many heaven-grade cultivators, so naturally, he had obtained a lot of flight-type spirit artifacts. Among them, Lu Yi chose a spirit artifact that was similar in shape to the previous spirit boat and pushed his spirit chi to refine the seal on it. With Lu Ye's current cultivation and the purity of his spirit chi, it wouldn't take him much effort to refine such a spirit artifact. After a stick of incense worth of time, another flight-type spirit artifact appeared under Lu Ye's feet. Compared to the previous one, this one was undoubtedly of better quality. Boosted in flight, the spirit boat turned into a stream of light and flew forward. Chapter 367. With Lu Ye's current speed, it took him less than an incense stick's worth of time to reach the center of the fiery lands. At the very center was a huge crater. The high temperatures surging out of the crater caused space to distort. Lu Yi circled around the crater on his artifact and looked around. He could vaguely see a ball of raging flames at the bottom of the crater. The Banshee was right. There was indeed a ball of fire here. However, this ball of fire was extraordinarily powerful. Even the earth seemed to have been burned through. No one had ever imagined that the center of the land of fire would be like this. The cultivators active in the Spirit Stream battlefield were only at the Spirit Stream realm. Even experts like Feng Yuechan and Li Baxin couldn't reach here safely. Even an overlord like the Banshee could only stay more than 100 miles away. If Lu Yi hadn't borrowed the power of his talent tree, he definitely wouldn't have been able to reach this place. His head felt a little dizzy, a sign that he had exhausted too much mental power. He had experienced this feeling many times in the 100 Formation Pagoda. He took out the last half bottle of soul-cleansing water and drank a drop. Only then did his mental exhaustion quickly fade. He couldn't delay any longer. The spirit vessel beneath his feet emitted cracking sounds. It seemed that even this spirit artifact couldn't withstand the corrosion of the high temperature. He urged the spirit vessel to fly down into the huge crater. He fell for several miles before reaching the bottom. Putting away the spirit vessel, Lu Yi looked at the ball of fire in front of him in amazement. This ball of fire was only the size of a wash basin. It was orange in color and gave off an extremely noble and holy feeling. Not only did it contain violent destructive power, but it also contained an indescribable vitality. Lu Yi didn't know what kind of fire it was and didn't have the heart to investigate it. He came here to borrow the talent tree to devour this flame. In his origin cavities, the talent tree clearly became more active. If he used the Insight Spirit rune, he could even see the talent tree's roots on the surface of Lu Ye's body constantly twisting and extending as if they wanted to pierce into the flame. There had never been a time when the talent tree gave Lu Yi such a desire. Lu Yi reached out and covered the orange flame. With the talent tree's roots covering the surface of his body, he didn't feel too much heat. Under his inner vision, the talent tree's roots were continuously absorbing orange-red energy into the tree. Lu Yi paid attention to the talent tree's leaves. He was very curious as to how many leaves would be burned if the talent tree devoured this ball of fire. A strange scene appeared. The orange-red power flowed through the tree, but it didn't burn the nearest leaf like it was supposed to. Instead, it crossed over many unburned leaves and reached the upper half of the tree. In an instant, a large number of leaves lit up. There were at least 100 or 200 leaves. Lu Yi was stunned. This was something that had never happened before. In the past, when he urged the talent tree to devour the earth core fire, the leaves on the talent tree would burn and only react to the next one. He had never experienced a reaction from 100 or 200 leaves at once. He wondered if it was because the fire was too strong. However, he soon realized that something was amiss. This unknown flame was indeed powerful. Otherwise, it would not have caused the environment within a radius of several thousand miles to become so intense. However, the leaves that reacted to it did not burn. Instead, they only lit up with patterns. As the talent tree continued to devour the power of the flames, the leaves became brighter and more dazzling. Finally, at a certain moment, the many leaves ignited with raging flames. Unlike the other leaves on the talent tree, the flames on these leaves were orange in color. They looked no different from the flames that were being devoured. Moreover, Lu Yi vaguely felt that the flames that gathered together seemed to be outlining a strange pattern. At first glance, it looked like a bird covered in flames was squatting on the talent tree. The swaying of the flames was mimicking the bird's movements. It looked very much like the vermilion bird of the 4 sacred beasts. It had a long tail and was extremely beautiful. Lu Yi couldn't figure out whether this was a coincidence or not. He was not in a hurry to find out what kind of spirit patterns were contained in the leaves. There were a lot of burning leaves this time. He could slowly investigate when he had the time. The orange-red flames from before had disappeared. They had all been devoured by the talent tree. Only then did Lu Yi relax. There was no way he could relax while urging the talent tree. It was not easy to persevere until now. Just as he was about to leave, the sound of something breaking through the air rang out above his head. A figure landed directly not far in front of him. The figure was slender and graceful. Her chest was bulging. Her scarlet eyes were like two floating will-o'-the-wisps in the dusky pit. Lu Ye's expression tensed up. He raised his hand and pressed down on the mountain pan saber. The pit underground was not small, but it was definitely not big. Moreover, it had been exposed to high temperatures all year round. The surrounding rock walls had turned into glass. It was extremely unwise to face an overlord-level existence in such an environment. With a heavy heart, he was only focused on devouring the flames. He had forgotten that without the suppression of the flames, the person in front of him could come over on his own. She had stopped more than 100 miles away because she could not bear the pressure of moving forward. Now that the flames were gone, the pressure was naturally gone too. Her scarlet eyes looked around. Where's the thing? She did not realize that Lu Yi had not promised her anything. I didn't see it. Lu Ye's fingers stroked the hilt of his saber. He glanced at the other party's slender neck. He thought about how difficult it would be to suddenly attack at this time. What was the probability of killing the other party with a single slash? In the end, he decided that if he really took the initiative to attack, it would not end well. Impossible. The demoness shook her head. I felt it before. Why don't you look for it yourself? The demoness did not say anything. She bent down and began to search. Her claws danced, and the crystallized ground immediately shattered. In the blink of an eye, dust flew into the air. I'll go first, Lu Yi said as he summoned his spirit boat. At the same time, he glanced at the demoness from the corner of his eye, guarding against her sudden attack. The result surprised Lu Yi. The other party was focused on searching for the flame that no longer existed. She did not pay attention to him at all. This demoness was strong, but there seemed to be something wrong with her intelligence. She probably would not have thought that there would be someone in this world who could devour such a powerful flame. Thinking back to their previous encounter, Lu Yi gradually confirmed this point. The battle between them was more like a demonic beast's instinct. It was not a true enmity. The spirit boat soared into the sky. The demoness did not seem to notice and continued to dig the ground. After digging for a long time, she still did not find anything. Only then did she realize that something was not right. She tilted her head and thought for a moment. Feathers grew on her arms, and in the blink of an eye, her arms turned into wings. With a flap of her wings, she soared into the sky and leaped out of the pit. Looking around, she seemed to be looking for traces of Lu Yi. But after such a long delay, how could she find Lu Yi? At this moment, Lu Yi maintained the wind spirit pattern on his spirit boat and flew as fast as lightning. The demoness' intelligence was questionable, but he could not expect her to be so stupid. It was not easy to escape from the tiger's den, so it was naturally more important to run away. After flying for more than half a day, Lu Ye's consumption of spiritual power was too severe. Only then did he land and find a place to rest in the forest. He then took out some array flags and arranged several interlocking array formations nearby. Only then did he feel much more at ease. In the past, he did not have the ability to set up formations. When he rested in the wild, he mostly needed to guard the surroundings. But now, there was no need. He could be considered to have some attainments in formations. With the formation flags, simple warning, concealment, and protective formations could be easily set up. Thinking back to what he had encountered during this period of time, he was first chased by a group of cultivators from the Myriad Devil Ridge. Then he was chased by a group of demon bees. After that, he was forced to run to this land of fire. He used the environment here to get rid of the demon bees. Then he encountered an overlord-level existence here. His days were really thrilling. He took out a few spirit pills and swallowed them to calm his nerves. Activating the gluttony meal, his stomach buzzed. The medicinal effect of the spirit pills quickly dissolved, and the consumed spirit power was slowly replenished. Lu Yi first contacted Yi to make sure that they were fine. Then he focused on the talent tree. This time, the talent tree lit up more than 100 leaves at once. It could be said that the harvest was huge. He did not know what kind of spirit patterns were contained in so many leaves. He was not in a hurry to check it out. It would not be too late to wait until he recovered. Lu Yi turned his attention to a storage bag. This storage bag was filled with good things that he had plundered from the huge beehive. Just the good grade honey alone was more than 1,000 caddies. He had tested the effect of this thing on his escape. It was especially effective for the recovery of physical strength and spirit power. Although it was not as good as the resting fruit wine, it was much faster than consuming spirit pills. It was just that it was not as convenient to eat as spirit pills every time. Perhaps there were some other effects. He could bring it back for second senior sister to study. Maybe there would be some unexpected discoveries. Other than the good grade honey, there was also the small half bowl of royal jelly. Lu Yi had not tasted what the effects of this thing were. He seriously suspected that the demon bees' relentless pursuit of him was not because he had stolen their honey. The biggest reason might be this half bowl of royal jelly. Such a huge beehive with so many demon bees could only produce this little bit of royal jelly. One could imagine how precious this thing was. If Lu Yi did not have the concealment spirit pattern, even a heaven level 9 ghost cultivator might not be able to succeed. Taking out an empty jade bottle, he took out a jade bottle full of royal jelly and drank it in one gulp. His mouth was full of sweetness. The consumed spirit power and physical strength were quickly recovered. The effect was much faster than the good grade honey. However, there did not seem to be anything special. Lu Yi silently sensed for a moment and soon found that something was wrong. An indescribable energy began to swim in his limbs and bones, causing his flesh and blood to squirm and become more compact. The flow of his chi and blood also became faster. Even the flow of his spirit power was faster. This royal jelly seemed to have a very obvious increase in the flow of his chi, blood, and spirit power. Chapter 368. Chi and blood and spiritual power were the two main directions of cultivation for spirit stream realm cultivators. Abundant chi and blood meant a strong physique. No matter which sect a cultivator belonged to, there was no harm in having a strong physique, not to mention spiritual power, which was the foundation of cultivation and fighting. The flow speed of these two was closely related to a cultivator's strength. There were two reasons why a cultivator's strength would increase greatly after switching to a heaven-grade cultivation method. First, it was because after switching to a heaven-grade cultivation method, a cultivator's control over their own spiritual power would increase greatly. Second, the speed at which spiritual power flowed within the body would also undergo a qualitative change. This royal jelly could increase the flow speed of chi and blood and spiritual power, which was equivalent to strengthening the physique of a body cultivator, and also increasing the strength of a cultivator. Take Lu Yi for example. After taking a bottle of royal jelly, although his cultivation did not change, the strength he could display was stronger than before. The only thing he didn't know was whether this effect was permanent or temporary. If it was temporary, then it wasn't worth much. There were some spirit pills that could achieve this effect, such as the Chi Eruption pill. This was a spirit pill that could temporarily increase a cultivator's strength. However, the aftereffects were very serious. If one wasn't careful, then one's spiritual cavities would be damaged. If it was permanent, then the value of this royal jelly was immeasurable. The effect of the royal jelly needed to be verified with time, so it was not clear for the time being. Lu Yi put his mind on the talent tree, looking at the area burning with orange flames. The more he looked at it, the more he felt it was like a bird squatting on a tree. Even if he changed his angle of view, there was not much change. This was very strange. Calming his mind, Lu Yi chose a leaf at random and focused, trying to see the patterns on the talent tree. A sudden change occurred. In his field of vision, the bird squatting on the talent tree seemed to come alive and suddenly flew down from the tree. The orange flames burned fiercely. The bird flapped its wings and dragged its long tail. The noble and holy figure filled Lu Ye's vision and even his mind in an instant. A clear and melodious cry sounded in his mind, loud and clear. Lu Yi did not make a sound and directly fainted. After the talent tree was activated in the mine of the Evil Moon Valley, Lu Yi encountered the same thing when he obtained his first spiritual tattoo. However, at that time, he had not yet been enlightened and was extremely weak, so his mind could not bear the complicated information contained in the leaf. However, as his cultivation level gradually increased, he no longer fainted while examining the talent tree's spirit inscriptions. Especially after he returned from the immortal Essence City, his divine soul's power had increased greatly. When he examined the talent tree, the impact of the enormous amount of information on the leaves was like a gentle breeze to him. Lu Yi had never thought that there would come a day when he would be knocked unconscious by the impact of probing his talent tree. He didn't even have time to react. In the quiet and dark land of inheritance, in a pool of clear water, a beautiful body floated out of the water with a splash. The clear water slid down her smooth skin. She inhaled greedily, as if she had been reborn. Looking at the clear pool before him, he couldn't help but shudder as he recalled the torture and pain he had suffered over the past few days. She didn't know how she had persevered these days. The water in the pool was not so clear, but dark green. From the inheritance, she learned that this was a poisonous pool. If one didn't use a unique secret method to protect himself, even a Spirit Sea Realm cultivator would lose a layer of skin if he fell into it. When she cultivated in the pool, she had several near-death experiences. Fortunately, she managed to survive in the end. Thinking back to the time when she chose to inherit this inheritance, she didn't know where she got the courage to do so. If she were to choose again at this time, she might not have the courage to do so. Because she had tried it, she knew the pain and suffering of inheriting this inheritance. It was double torture on the body and mind, but her consciousness was still very clear. Fortunately, it was all over. She lifted her foot and walked out of the 10,000 poison pool. The pool water slid down the exaggerated curves of her body. She activated her spiritual power to dry the water on her body and took out her clothes from the storage bag. She had a quiet and dignified temperament. Most of her clothes were white, but at this moment, she looked at the white dress in her hand and didn't know why she didn't like it very much. After thinking about it, she changed into a green dress. This time, she was satisfied. She dressed neatly and combed her hair. She raised her hand and tapped on her battlefield imprint, ready to share this joy. Suddenly, she remembered that this was the land of inheritance. It was isolated from the outside world and formed a space of its own. There was no way to communicate with the outside world. Thinking of that guy, the corner of her mouth curved into a smile. The next time he dared to casually grab her hand, she would let him know what it meant to regret being born into this world. She took out a large array jade pendant and activated the power of the jade pendant. The scene before her changed rapidly. The moon was bright and the stars were sparse. She opened her arms to embrace the moonlight, feeling unprecedentedly comfortable and relaxed. Now, she didn't have to worry about not being able to keep up with his pace. On this day, the most terrifying medical cultivator in the 9 provinces came out of seclusion. His consciousness was muddled. Lu Yi didn't know where he was. He only felt that the environment he was in was extremely cramped and oppressive. He wanted to stretch his body, but there was something restricting him. Soon, he realized that he seemed to have fainted. But what was going on with this awakened consciousness? This was very strange. It was like a person in a dream could realize that the environment they were in was a dream. Lu Yi treated his current situation as a dream. He wanted to wake up, but he couldn't do it. His consciousness gradually became clearer, but the environment he was in didn't change at all. After an unknown period of time, a light crack sounded and a ray of light shone into the darkness. Looking up, a crack seemed to have appeared in the sky. Then, the crack widened and the world around him shattered. A small furry thing suddenly appeared, surrounded by shattered eggshells. Only then did Lu Yi realize that everything just now wasn't his own experience. Instead, he was watching the scene of a little chick breaking out of its shell from the perspective of a bystander. It didn't seem to be a little chick. That little thing was much bigger than a normal chick. Moreover, as soon as it was born, it swallowed all the shattered eggshells into its stomach. It ate until its belly was round and round. The little chick burped and spat out a ball of flame from its mouth. time seemed to have sped up countless times. Scene after scene flashed past Lu Ye's vision. The little chick grew up. It was a bird covered in orange flames, dressed in colorful clothes, and had long feathers on its tail. The divine beast of the four symbols, the vermilion bird. Lu Ye's eyes followed the vermilion bird, witnessing its growth. He watched as it annihilated many powerful enemies, sweeping through everything before it. One day, this world would no longer be able to restrain its burning desire to seek the truth. It soared into the sky, flying towards outer space, entering the boundless starry sky to explore an even vaster world. After an unknown period of time, a ball of orange flames fell from the sky, burning through the sky and streaking across the horizon before landing on the ground. The burning flames burned through the ground and the entire world shook. Wherever the flames landed, everything within a radius of tens of thousands of miles was destroyed and turned into nothingness. Lu Yi suddenly opened his eyes. In an instant, an indescribable pain assaulted his mind. The feeling was so painful that his entire body curled up. His body trembled violently and his face was as white as a sheet. Thinking about the strength of his soul, even if it couldn't compare to a true lake-stage cultivator, it shouldn't be too far off. But after receiving the information from the talent tree's leaf, he still had such a huge reaction. One could only imagine how enormous the information was. Trembling, he took out the soul-cleansing water. Without caring about how much he drank, he raised his head and drank a mouthful. Only then did the pain in his soul slowly recede. Exhausted, he lay on the ground. His thoughts were muddled and his eyes were lifeless. He fell into a deep sleep. When he woke up, there was still some lingering fear in his heart. When he shook his head, his brain seemed to shake along with it. It had been a long time since he had experienced this feeling, but he didn't expect to experience pain that far exceeded any of the previous times. Lu Yi faintly suspected that if it weren't for the fact that his soul was strong enough, he would have lost his mind from the impact of the enormous amount of information. After sorting out the chaotic information in his mind, he finally understood why he had encountered such a situation. This time, the burning leaves didn't exist on their own. They were a whole. Because the information contained within was too enormous, each leaf carried a part of it. Lu Yi examined each leaf, which was equivalent to examining the whole thing. In other words, the information contained within 100 or 200 leaves had all surged into Lu Ye's mind at once. Even if his soul was now far beyond the spirit stream realm, there was still a limit to what it could withstand, which was why he had fainted. The various strange scenes he had seen while he was unconscious were not the information contained within the talent tree's leaves, but rather the information contained within the flames that the talent tree had devoured. That flame had come from the vermilion bird, one of the four sacred beasts. It was an incomplete true phoenix fire, and because too much time had passed, the incomplete true phoenix fire had weakened a lot. Therefore, the scenes that Lu Yi had seen while he was unconscious had been intermittent. He didn't know what had happened to the vermilion bird after it left its world. It had been beaten to the point that only a ball of true phoenix fire was left. In the end, it had drifted to the spirit stream battlefield and created the land of fire. It was rumored that phoenixes could undergo nirvana and be reborn. Lu Yi didn't know whether this rumor was true or not, but now, it seemed that it was most likely false. The true phoenix fire had been devoured by the talent tree, so how could it undergo nirvana? When the information contained within 100 or 200 leaves was gathered together, it was a spirit pattern, and at the same time, it was also a spell technique. Spirit patterns and spell techniques weren't very different in terms of origin, but the former had many types and a wide range of uses, while the latter focused on battle. If a comparison had to be made, then spell techniques were simplified spirit patterns. The new spirit pattern that Lu Yi had obtained was called Fire Phoenix. Chapter 369. It was undeniable that this was an extremely powerful spiritual pattern, and its power was definitely far beyond any of the spiritual patterns that Lu Yi had mastered before. However, Lu Yi didn't dare to try to activate it rashly. Judging from the complexity of this spirit inscription, the amount of spirit energy required to construct this spirit inscription was extremely large. With Lu Ye's current cultivation, If he really wanted to construct this spirit inscription, he was afraid that his spirit energy would be exhausted. This thing was similar to a trump card. Once it was used, either the enemy or himself would die. However, the name Fire Phoenix reminded Lu Yi of some unpleasant experiences. When he cultivated the red lotus soaring to the sky secret art, it came with two kinds of techniques, one of which was the Fire Phoenix technique. As a result, Lu Yi somehow turned it into the Fire Quail technique. It wasn't until he returned from the immortal Essence City that his soul power greatly increased, and his control of spiritual power improved by leaps and bounds, that the form of the technique improved. At present, Lu Yi didn't use many techniques, and all the cultivators in 9 regions knew that he was a weapon cultivator. It was difficult for him to use techniques to cover up his school. Moreover, his method of controlling equipment was powerful. When he attacked the enemy from a distance, he only needed to control the equipment, and there was no need to use techniques. Now, his talent tree had swallowed an incomplete and weak Phoenix True Fire, which allowed him to obtain the Fire Phoenix spiritual pattern. Moreover, when he was in a coma, he also witnessed the majestic appearance of the vermilion bird. All these experiences made his understanding of the Fire Phoenix technique reach an indescribable level. It could be said that in the entire 9 regions, no one knew more about the Fire Phoenix than him. With a slight thought, his spirit energy surged. When he raised his hand and pointed, the Fire Phoenix technique was displayed. A fiery red figure suddenly pounced out, dragging a long tail. The feathers on its body were extremely exquisite, and the patterns were clearly visible. Under his control, this technique was like a living thing, hovering above his head, and immediately landed on a nearby tree trunk, where it lowered its head and combed its feathers. Then, with a bang, it collapsed and turned into a little fluorescent light. Now, the Fire Phoenix technique he displayed was undoubtedly many times more powerful than before. This was not only because of the improvement of his strength, but also because of the various benefits brought by this experience. It was an unexpected gain. After all, there was still a problem of continuity when using the equipment to kill the enemy. There was no need for techniques. As long as the spiritual power in the body was enough, techniques could be cast at will. Moreover, Lu Yi also found an unexpected surprise. The royal jelly had a permanent effect on qi, blood, and spiritual power. He didn't know how long he had been in a coma, but compared to before, the flow of his qi, blood, and spirit energy had not weakened. Instead, it seemed to have sped up. This undoubtedly showed that the effect of the royal jelly was not temporary. Come to think of it, with such a huge bee colony working hard to produce only half a bowl of royal jelly, it must be extraordinary. Lu Yi checked the array he had set up and found that there were traces of it being activated. It seemed that it had been activated by a nearby demonic beast. This made Lu Yi rejoice. Fortunately, he had been careful enough to set up a chain array. Otherwise, after being unconscious for so long, he would have been in a terrible state. There was a sudden movement from the battlefield imprint. Lu Yi looked down and saw that it was a message from Yi. His expression gradually turned grave. There was more than one message from Yi, and there were several of them. They were all sent while he was unconscious, but he couldn't respond at that time. Looking at the time, 5 or 6 days had passed. Yi's message was a cry for help. She and Giant Armor had been waiting for Lu Yi to meet up with them somewhere outside the hidden fog mountain. In the end, they were discovered by a passing cultivator from the Myriad Demons Ridge. With no other choice, Giant Armor could only flee with Yi and Hupo. Giant Armor's physical characteristics were too obvious. Moreover, many people from the Myriad Devil Ridge had seen him with Lu Yi, so they naturally knew that they were together. So many people from the Myriad Devil Ridge had chased Lu Yi to the hidden fog mountain, but they had not been able to do anything to Lu Yi. Now that they had discovered Giant Armor, how could they let him go? Fortunately, Giant Armor was not so easy to deal with. His physique was stronger than the average Heaven Rank 9 cultivator. Many cultivators from the Myriad Devil Ridge had surrounded him, but he still managed to kill his way out. Originally, Giant Armor wanted to bring Yi and Hupa back to the hidden fog mountain because Lu Yi was definitely there. Although they did not know why they could not contact him, as long as they entered the hidden fog mountain, they would have a chance to find Lu Yi and meet up with him. However, giant armor did not have Lu Yi's various methods and speed. After several failed attempts, they encountered more and more enemies. They had no choice but to escape in the direction away from the hidden fog mountain. In terms of escaping, giant armor was stronger than Lu Yi in terms of both his physique and endurance. He had his own unique Yao core, so his spirit power reserve was extremely large. As long as his physical strength could keep up, he could continue flying until the energy in his Yao core was exhausted. This was something that no spirit stream realm cultivator could compare to. As time passed, more and more people from the Myriad Devil Ridge were dispatched. Although the Grand Heaven Alliance had many countermeasures, they were unable to contain all the cultivators from the Myriad Devil Ridge. Now, giant armor had brought Yi and Hupa to hide in a dangerous place called the Myriad Poison Forest. The situation was not very good. Firstly, the Myriad Poison Forest was marked as a dangerous place on the map. Like the Land of Fire, it was a forbidden area for cultivators. The danger of that place was similar to the Land of Fire. The danger of the Land of Fire came from the incomplete and weak True Phoenix Fire. The closer one was to the center, the more intense the environment would be. The danger of the Myriad Poison Forest was poison. It was shrouded in a boundless poisonous miasma all year round. The deeper one went, the more intense the poison was. Not only was the environment harsh, but there were also many poisonous creatures living there, from small spiders and ants to large poisonous pythons and fierce beasts. Even the spirit plants that lived there were extremely poisonous. They had no choice but to hide in the Myriad Poison Forest because there were many cultivators from the Myriad Devil Ridge. Giant armor had nowhere to run. There was no other way except for the Myriad Poison Forest. Currently, they were near the periphery of the Myriad Poison Forest and could not escape because the entire Myriad Poison Forest was surrounded by Myriad Devil Ridge cultivators. The people from the Myriad Devil Ridge did not dare to go deep into the Myriad Poison Forest. They had made up their minds to trap giant armor inside. At the same time, they were waiting for Lu Yi because they were certain that Lu Yi would not abandon giant armor. As long as they guarded giant armor, Lu Yi would definitely come. As time passed, more and more Myriad Devil Ridge cultivators gathered in the direction of the Myriad Poison Forest. "Hold on, wait for me," Lu Yi hurriedly replied. He collected the formation flags that he had scattered around and took out his spirit boat to soar into the sky. "Soon," Yi replied. "The situation is okay. The poison here is not too strong. The honey collected in the hidden fog mountain has some detoxification effect. We can still hold on. Be careful." The fact that ordinary honey had a detoxifying effect surprised Lu Yi, but it wasn't strange when he thought about it. Bees were poisonous by nature, and honey brewed by poisonous bees naturally had a detoxifying effect. This was the same principle as most places where poisonous snakes appeared had detoxifying herbs. Fortunately, giant armor and the others had brought a lot of honey with them. Otherwise, they would not have been able to hold on. From the 10-point map, the Myriad Poison Forest was not close to the hidden fog mountain. It could be seen that giant armor had fled with Yi and Hupo without stopping. Otherwise, it would not make sense for them to run so far away in just a few days. It was not that Yi had not thought of entering a Grand Heaven Alliance's base to take refuge. However, if they really went there, they would definitely bring disaster to the Grand Heaven Alliance. Moreover, without Lu Yi and the Guardian there signing an alliance contract, they would not be able to use the other party's Tianji pillar to return to the 9 states. The final result would be that their refuge would be besieged by tens of thousands of Myriad Devil Ridge cultivators. Then, the base would be destroyed in giant armor and the others would have nowhere to run. Therefore, entering the Myriad Poison Forest was their only choice. There was one thing that Yi did not tell Lu Yi. The Myriad Devil Ridge cultivators were no longer satisfied with besieging them. They were preparing to enter the Myriad Poison Forest and capture giant armor alive. The reason why they had not taken action was that the number of detoxification pills they needed was too large. They were collecting them from everywhere. Once the detoxification pills were in place, the Myriad Devil Ridge would definitely take action. Lu Yi quickly rushed in the direction of the Myriad Poison Forest. He checked the battlefield imprint again. Hua Xi had left a message before, but he did not have time to check it. Hua Xi wanted to return to Ying Mountain and enter the land of inheritance. Lu Yi vaguely sensed that the place she was going to was not very safe. If it was really safe, Hua Xi would have obtained all the inheritances in the land of inheritance. There was no need to delay. He tried to stop her, but he did not succeed, so he did not force it. Later, when he was fighting a battle of wits and courage with the myriad Devil Ridge cultivators in the hidden Fog Mountain, Lu Yi wanted to send a message to Hua Xi to ask about the situation. However, he found that he could not contact Hua Xi. He could only infer from the imprint that she was still alive. Now that Hua Xi took the initiative to send a message, it was obvious that she had left the land of inheritance. He just did not know how she had gained. He and giant armor are trapped. I'm on my way. This was Hua Xi's message. Lu Yi hurriedly replied, "Don't come over. I'm already on my way." Hua Xi quickly replied, "You're still alive?" "Same here." "Ha." Lu Ye's eyebrows twitched. "What do you mean by, ha?" "Nothing." Lu Yi wanted to ask her what she meant by, nothing. However, considering that if this continued, the conversation would only be endless, he sent a message. "Anyway, don't come over first. The situation is not very good. Got it? Be careful. The child can't live without a father." Lu Yi almost lost his mind. This woman was becoming more and more unscrupulous with her words. Just as he was about to retort, he suddenly felt an aura rapidly approaching from the side. Lu Yi turned to look and immediately had a headache. It was none other than the Overlord-level Demoness. He did not know how she had discovered him. Perhaps it was just a coincidence. If it was a coincidence, then he was too unlucky. Compared to the last time he saw her, this Demoness form had changed. Her arms had turned into wings, and the feathers on her wings were fiery red. Considering that the vermilion bird was also a type of flying beast, it was not strange that this Demoness could sense the Phoenix True Fire from more than 100 miles away. Chapter 370. Lu Yi even suspected that the reason this Overlord-level Demoness was so powerful was because she had been absorbing the true Phoenix Fire's energy all year round. If that was the case, then the true Phoenix Fire must be fatally attractive to this Demoness. Seeing this Demoness, Lu Yi immediately activated his Wind Elemental Spirit Tattoo to strengthen the spirit boat, increasing its speed by another level. However, the aura chasing after him was rapidly closing in. Lu Yi turned to look, and the corners of his eyes twitched. He saw that the Demoness had caught up to him first, running neck to neck with him. She was a bird-type Yao and had the strength of an Overlord-level beast. Even if Lu Yi activated his Wind Elemental Spirit Tattoo, he couldn't beat her in speed unless he activated his Flight Wing Tattoo. However, his Flight Wing Tattoo's time limit was up, so he couldn't use it anymore. What made Lu Yi feel slightly relieved was that although the Demoness had caught up, she didn't seem to have any intention of attacking. "That fire," the Demoness suddenly said, looking at Lu Yi with her crimson eyes. Lu Ye's heart tightened, and he pressed his hand on the mountain plate saber, waiting for the Demoness to ask something he couldn't answer. He had to save Yi and the others, so he didn't have time to waste with this Demoness. As for whether he could beat her, the chances were slim, but if he used all his cards, it wouldn't be easy for the Demoness to deal with him. "I didn't find it." It would be strange if she found it. The true Phoenix Fire had been swallowed by the talent tree long ago, and there would probably be no more fiery places in the Spirit Stream battlefield. "I didn't see it either," Lu Yi said calmly. "Are you mistaken?" "Impossible." From the beginning to the end, she did not suspect that it was Lu Yi who had destroyed the flame, because in her opinion, Lu Yi was much weaker than her. Even she could not easily obtain the flame, so how could Lu Yi do it? "You can't feel it now?" The Demoness shook her head, looking a little disappointed. Lu Yi thought for a moment, then said, "It's like this. There are many treasures in this world that have developed their own spirituality after a long time. Those who are fated can easily obtain them, while those who are unfated can't even see them. Since you're sure there's a fire there, but we didn't see it, maybe we're not fated." "Fated?" "Yes, fated. The demoness fell into deep thought. Her fiery red wings flapped from time to time. It looked like she wasn't using her full strength, but Lu Yi was still unable to shake her off. After thinking for a long time, she suddenly said, "Is that ball of fire still there? Is it avoiding me?" I didn't say anything. The demoness suddenly stopped and turned around to fly towards the land of fire. It looked like she was sure that the ball of fire was still there and was just hiding from her so that she could not see it. Lu Yi sighed as he watched the demoness disappear. The Creator was indeed fair. When he bestowed some things, he would deprive others. With the demoness' intelligence, it was fortunate that she was strong enough. Otherwise, she would have died long ago. The unexpected interlude didn't affect Lu Yi too much. He continued on his way, heading straight for the forest of 1,000 poisons. Judging from the map, it would take him less than 2 days to reach the forest of 1,000 poisons if he flew with the wind travel spiritual tattoo. But without the wind travel spiritual tattoo, it would take him twice as long. It was impossible for Lu Yi to maintain the wind travel spirit rune all the time because doing so would consume too much spirit energy and he wouldn't be able to bear it. If he didn't maintain the wind travel spiritual tattoo, he could barely keep up with the consumption of spirit energy. Even if he consumed more spirit energy, he could still use the rest fruit wine. He continuously stuffed spirit pills into his mouth and refined them. From time to time, he would activate the wind travel spiritual tattoo to increase his speed. At the same time, more than 3,000 cultivators from the Myriad Demon Ridge had gathered around the forest of 1,000 poisons. As time passed, more cultivators continued to gather. In the hidden fog mountain, the failure of the Yi League had already spread. So many people had chased after Lu Yi, but in the end, not only had they failed, but hundreds of them had also died. It was simply unbelievable. This was not a failure of a certain sect. This was the face of the entire Myriad Demon Ridge being trampled on by Lu Yi. It also made the Myriad Demon Ridge completely realize that if they didn't get rid of Lu Yi now, it would really be too late. In the pursuit of Lu Yi in the hidden fog mountain, many first-grade sects and cultivators on the spirit stream list didn't participate because of their status. However, it was different this time. Among the cultivators gathered outside the forest of 1,000 poisons, there were more than 20 cultivators on the spirit stream list. The strongest one was ranked in the 30s. There were even rumors that the top 10 cultivators were hiding in the dark, waiting for Lu Yi to appear so they could give him a fatal blow. This time, there were even more cultivators from the Myriad Demon Ridge than last time. Compared to the pursuit of Lu Yi in the hidden fog mountain, the situation was undoubtedly on the Myriad Demon Ridge's side. The hidden fog mountain was vast and boundless, and the environment was special. If Lu Yi hid inside, it would be difficult to find him. Even if they found him, they might not be his match. However, the forest of 1,000 poisons was different. The forest of 1,000 poisons covered a much smaller area than the hidden fog mountain. The Myriad Demon Ridge had plenty of people and could surround the entire forest of 1,000 poisons. As a result, those who were surrounded would not be able to escape. For example, Giant Armor and E, who were currently trapped. As for whether they would continue to hide and not come out, there was no need to worry. The forest of 1,000 poisons was filled with poison. Even if they could hold on for a while, they could not hold on forever. The only result of hiding and not coming out was death from the poison. It was precisely because they realized this that the Myriad Demon Ridge wanted to enter the forest of 1,000 poisons and capture Giant Armor alive. It was not easy to block Giant Armor, so they could not let him die in the forest of 1,000 poisons. Otherwise, they would not have the capital to restrain Sect Destroyer Yi. Capturing Giant Armor alive and forcing Lu Yi to appear was the Myriad Demon Ridge's plan. The detoxification pills and poison-repelling treasures collected from all over the forest of 1,000 poisons were in place. With the cooperation of the various parties of the Myriad Demon Ridge, groups of people entered the forest of 1,000 poisons from all directions to search for Giant Armor. Soon, news came that a team had encountered Giant Armor and Lu Yi's White Tiger mount. Unfortunately, they were unable to capture him alive and he had escaped. The Myriad Demon Ridge cultivators were in high spirits and continued to suppress Giant Armor's living space, trying to force him out. During this period, Giant Armor tried to escape on his artifact several times, but he was beaten back by the myriad Demon Ridge cultivators who sealed off the sky. For a time, the Forest of 1,000 Poisons seemed to have become a hopeless situation. News that made the myriad Demon Ridge even more excited came. Lu Ye had appeared. He was less than half a day's journey away from the Forest of 1,000 Poisons and was rushing over. When the news spread, the myriad Demon Ridge was overjoyed, knowing that their previous plan had worked. Immediately, many cultivators retreated from the Forest of 1,000 Poisons and stood guard outside the forest. They set up many traps and waited for Lu Ye to walk into the trap. There were even more impatient ones who directly approached Lu Ye, clearly wanting to kill him. Only half a day's journey away from the Forest of 1,000 Poisons, Lu Ye was flying on his artifact with a stream of light following behind him. If he rushed over so openly, his whereabouts would inevitably be exposed. Moreover, he had never thought of hiding his whereabouts. He knew very well what the myriad Demon Ridge's plan was. He did not know how Yi and Giant Armor were doing. When he asked, Yi only said that everything was fine. Obviously, she was not telling the truth. Now that he was attracting some myriad Demon Ridge cultivators here, the pressure on Yi and the others in the Forest of 1,000 Poisons would be less. There were dozens of myriad Demon Ridge cultivators following behind him. Just like when they were being chased previously, there were constantly people falling behind and people joining the ranks of the pursuers. Lu Ye did not intend to be entangled with them. Right now, his spirit energy was precious and it was not good to waste it here. As he chased, he swept past a forest. Suddenly, Lu Ye sensed something and looked down. What entered his eyes was a burst of sword light. The endless sword light gathered into a sword dragon and attacked the pursuers behind him with cold killing intent. Along with the sword light that blotted out the sky and covered the earth, there were also more than 10 figures dressed in plain clothes. Beixian Sword Sect. Someone among the myriad Demon Ridge cultivators who were chasing Lu Ye shouted in panic. Lu Ye immediately stopped and changed direction to kill the pursuers behind him. Before he arrived, 9 streams of light shot out from the weapon box. Previously, he was unwilling to be entangled with the pursuers because he was alone. Even if he could kill some of them, it would be difficult for 2 fists to fight against 4 hands. However, it was different now that he had help. Moreover, the helpers were more than 10 sword maniacs who were known for their killing. Sword light surged and exploded, and miserable screams were heard continuously. Although there were many myriad Demon Ridge cultivators chasing after them, they were still afraid of the Beixian Sword Sect's sword maniacs. One had to know that these sword maniac sword control technique was known as the #1 killing technique in the 9 prefectures. Moreover, Lu Ye was also involved. Compared to the Beixian Sword Sect's sword cultivators, Lu Ye's killing speed was not slow at all. After a hasty exchange of blows, there were many casualties. Only a dozen people managed to escape in time, and all of them were injured. The rest were all killed on the spot. Being ambushed by a group of sword maniacs was definitely not a good ending. With a clang, 9 streams of light flew into the weapon box. Lu Ye shook off the blood on the mountain pan saber and sheathed it. He looked at the sword cultivator in the lead. He actually knew him. On top of the golden light, Li Baxian had instructed this person to protect Lu Ye. However, this person's cultivation was not very high at that time, but now he was in the 9 heavens realm. Lu Ye remembered that this person's name was Yu Lianzhou. "Greetings, Uncle Master Lu." Yu Lianzhou bowed solemnly, and so did the 10-odd sword cultivators behind him. Lu Ye hurriedly raised his hand to stop them. "Don't call me Uncle Master, you're making me sound old. I'm not as old as you guys." In terms of seniority, Li Baxian was 1 generation higher than them. Li Baxian was Lu Ye's 4th senior brother, so it was not strange that they would address Lu Ye as Uncle Master. In fact, there were only a few cultivators in the entire Spirit Stream battlefield who were of the same generation as Lu Ye. Back when Xueyuan went to the main sect of the Heaven Expanse sect, the sect master of the Heaven Expanse sect, Yu Shao, even addressed Xueyuan as senior sister. Cultivators had long lifespans, so most of the time, seniority was not easy to calculate. Unless they were on very good terms with each other, they would address each other as senior brother. You guys are related to my fourth senior brother, so it's not appropriate for us to address each other as fellow Taoists. Fellow Taoist Lu, Yu Lianzhou said. Why are you guys here? Lu Ye asked. It was clearly not a coincidence that he would run into these sword cultivators here. Chapter 371. If Wan Mo Ridge could see that Lu Yi was a huge threat to them and wanted to get rid of him, how could Haotian Alliance not see it? To Wan Mo Ridge, Lu Yi was a jinx and the source of chaos. However, to Haotian Alliance, Lu Yi was a rising star of the younger generation and a mainstay to fight against Wan Mo Ridge in the future. Their attitudes towards people and things were naturally different due to their different standpoints. If Wan Mo Ridge wanted to kill, Haotian Alliance would protect. Since ancient times, the confrontation between the two camps had always been like this. No one would easily go along with the other's wishes. Not only did Beixian Sword Sect send people, but many sects in the core region also sent people. However, Haotian Alliance did not know where Lu Yi would come from, so they spread out and waited. If Lu Yi came from this direction, he would encounter Beixian Sword Sect. If he came from another direction, he might encounter Vitality Sect, Green Jade Sect, or even by Yun Palace. Beixian Sword Sect was very strict in accepting disciples. Among all the first-grade sects in the entire 9 states, this sect had the least number of disciples. In the core region, there were only a few dozen cultivators in Beixian Sword Sect's encampment. More than 10 people were sent out at once, which showed how important Lu Yi was. Li Baxian must be one of the reasons. Taoist Lu, you can't go to the forest of 1,000 poisons. Wan Mo Ridge has set up many traps there and is only waiting for you to walk into the trap. Someone from Jade Blood Sect is trapped there. I heard that. Even if you want to go, you can't go now. You have to gather people first. Wan Mo Ridge has the upper hand now. There are thousands of Wan Mo Ridge cultivators gathered there. Without enough people, it will be difficult to break through their defense line. We can't wait. The environment inside is terrible. My Jade Blood Sect's disciples have been trapped there for several days. If we delay any longer, I'm afraid they will die. Lu Yi turned to look at Yu Lianzhou. If Beixian Sword Sect's disciples are trapped there, what will you do? Yu Lianzhou pondered for a moment. I understand. Then we will go with you. I am very grateful for your kindness. However, it will be dangerous. You don't have to go deep into the forest of 1,000 poisons. Taoist, you want to go alone? Yu Lianzhou understood what Lu Yi meant. I might be able to break through their defense line and enter the forest of 1,000 poisons. Perhaps. I've never tried it before, so I'm not sure. However, I'll still have to trouble you all to send me off. My whereabouts have been exposed, and many people from the Myriad Devil Ridge will probably come to intercept me. I need to recover for a while and maintain my spiritual power. But, fellow Taoist Lu, even if you do have the means to break through their defensive line and enter the forest of 1,000 poisons, what can you do? That place is filled with poisonous miasma and is a place of great danger. If you can't escape, you'll eventually die there. I have my own plans. Please rest assured, fellow Taoist. Yu Lianzhou looked at him with a frown, not knowing if he was telling the truth. Li smiled. I cherish my life more than any of you. Only then did Yu Lianzhou nod his head. Then we'll do as you say. However, if things are impossible, don't force yourself. Understood. Go. With a low shout, Yu Lianzhou flew up on his flying sword. Lu Yi stepped onto his flying sword, and the group of more than 10 people turned into streaks of sword light as they flew towards the forest of 1,000 poisons. Lu Yi was previously worried about the endurance of his spiritual power. Now that Yu Lianzhou was carrying him on his flying sword, he could rest assured and recover his spiritual power. He stuffed a large number of spirit pills into his mouth and activated the gluttonous meal. His stomach buzzed nonstop, and his spiritual power quickly recovered. Along the way, there were many Grand Heaven Alliance cultivators who received the message and rushed over to gather. There were also Myriad Devil Ridge cultivators who came to kill Lu Yi. However, after a few groups were wiped out, those Myriad Devil Ridge cultivators didn't dare to come over and act presumptuously. They didn't even dare to follow from afar. This was because sword cultivators were very fast on their flying swords. Once they were targeted by the North Mystery Sword Sect's sword maniacs, there was a high chance that they wouldn't be able to escape. Gradually, more and more people from the Grand Heaven Alliance gathered. Soon, there were more than 200 people. However, just as Yu Lianzhou had said before, the Myriad Devil Ridge had the upper hand this time. They had gathered more people than the Grand Sky Alliance. Therefore, the Grand Sky Alliance would not be able to gather too many people in a short time. He originally wanted to persuade Lu Yi to wait a few more days for the Grand Heaven Alliance to gather enough people before going to war with the Myriad Devil Ridge. However, he didn't succeed in persuading him. Normally, waiting a few more days wouldn't be a problem. However, in the current situation, neither Lu Yi nor Giant Armor could wait. Moreover, even if the Grand Heaven Alliance gathered enough people, they would at most be in a confrontation with the Myriad Devil Ridge. A confrontation with thousands of people usually wouldn't result in a battle because there were too many people. Once a battle broke out, both sides would suffer heavy casualties. This was unbearable for either side. Just like in the inner circle, the Myriad Devil Ridge gathered a similar number of cultivators to deal with the Grand Heaven Alliance army that Lu Yi had pulled out. In the past, the two factions wouldn't have such a large-scale operation. No one wanted to force the other side to fight to the death. However, ever since Lu Yi caused a storm in the inner circle, this kind of large-scale gathering of cultivators seemed to have become the norm. On Lianzhou's spirit sword, Lu Ye's spirit power had become abundant, but he was still somewhat uncertain. The Fire Phoenix spirit pattern that required 1 to 200 leaves was extremely complicated to construct. However, with the talent tree, Lu Yi wasn't worried that the construction would fail. The only thing that worried him was that the spirit power consumed during the construction of this spirit pattern would be extremely large. With Lu Ye's current cultivation level, he might not be able to construct it. If his spirit power was exhausted during the construction process, the scene was simply unimaginable. Consuming aura fruit wine while constructing the spirit pattern was a solution, but there was no guarantee that he would be able to replenish it in time. The best solution was to quickly increase his spirit power reserves. However, how could spirit power reserves be increased so easily? If he wanted to increase his spirit power reserves, he had to open more apertures. Even if Lu Ye's aperture opening speed was very fast, it would be difficult to achieve results in a short period of time. Lu Yi thought of a spirit pattern. Spirit storage. This spirit pattern was specially used to store spirit power. Every Imperial artifact had a barrier built with spirit storage as the core. Otherwise, after the Imperial artifact left the body, it would be impossible to use it. The key to Imperial artifact manipulation for cultivators was that after their cultivation reached the 7th order, they would be able to control their spirit power and store it in their Imperial artifact in advance. By controlling the stored spirit power, they could achieve the purpose of Imperial artifact manipulation. If he could use the spirit storage to store a large amount of spirit power, he would undoubtedly be able to solve the problem he had to face. The spirit-gathering spirit pattern could enhance his body, the blood-stained spirit pattern could also enhance his body, so naturally, the spirit storage spirit pattern could also enhance his body. Thinking of this, Lu Yi immediately urged his spirit power to construct a spirit storage spirit pattern on his chest. Immediately, he urged his spirit power and poured it into the spirit storage spirit pattern to store it. The spirit storage spirit pattern itself required spirit power to maintain, and injecting one's spirit power into it like this was another consumption. What's more, the impact of the injection of spirit power could cause the spirit pattern to collapse. This was undoubtedly a huge test for Lu Yi. Fortunately, his soul was tough enough, his mind strong enough, and his control over his spirit power was smooth. As his spirit power slowly poured into the spirit storage spirit pattern, Lu Yi slowly adapted, and the spirit pattern showed no signs of collapsing. After confirming that his idea was feasible, Lu Yi took out a spirit pill and swallowed it, then drank a bottle of fruit wine to supplement his consumption. As time passed, Yu Lianzhou suddenly looked back at Lu Yi. He vaguely felt that there was something wrong with Lu Yi behind him. From Lu Ye's body he could sense a dangerous aura. It wasn't that Lu Yi was trying to sneak attack him, but rather that Lu Yi himself was like a balloon that was about to burst, his spiritual energy fluctuations becoming extremely unstable. Not only did he feel it, but the other cultivators who were nearby also noticed it and looked over. At this moment, the spirit storage spirit pattern on Lu Ye's chest had reached its limit and could no longer store any more spirit energy. Feeling it a little, the spirit energy stored in this spirit pattern was equivalent to about 30% of his total reserves. Since his spirit was still extremely abundant, Lu Yi simply constructed the same spirit storage spirit pattern on his back, repeating the same process. With previous experience, it was much simpler this time. If Lu Ye's spiritual energy reserve could be compared to a pool, then he had dug 2 connected small pools on the side of the pool. The total amount of spiritual energy stored in these 2 small pools was about 60% of his spiritual energy. Lu Yi continued until he felt that the spirit energy stored should be enough, then he stopped. At this time, there were as many as 5 pools in his body. The corner of Yu Lianzhou's eyes had already twitched, and his keen perception allowed him to clearly perceive the crisis from behind. If Lu Yi was like a balloon that was about to burst before, then now he was a volcano that could erupt at any time. He didn't know what Lu Yi was doing, but he was sure that fellow Taoist Lu was doing something unusual, and it was a very dangerous thing. Fellow Taoist Yu, please speed up. Lu Ye's voice suddenly came from behind. Previously, in order to wait for the reinforcements from the Haotian alliance, Yu Lianzhou's flying speed was not fast because in his understanding, it was better to have more people. Even if the people gathered now were like a mantis trying to stop a chariot, it was better to gather as many people as possible. As for Lu Ye's previous statement that he might be able to break through the defense line of the Wanmo Ridge and enter the forest of 1,000 poisons, Yu Lianzhou didn't care. There was a limit to human strength. Even if Lu Ye's previous performance was monstrous, facing so many cultivators from the Wanmo Ridge, it was difficult for him to do it alone. While rushing forward, he had already discussed with the other cultivators from the Haotian alliance that came to join them. They would charge together and try their best to tear through the defense line of the Wanmo Ridge, then enter the forest of 1,000 poisons. If it really couldn't be done, then they would retreat and plan slowly. They could understand Lu Ye's feelings of wanting to go deep into the forest of 1,000 poisons to save their cultivators, so they were willing to take this risk with Lu Yi. However, when he felt the strong crisis behind him, Yu Lianzhou had a little confidence in Lu Ye's previous statement that he might be able to break through the defense line of the Wanmo Ridge. This method had not been used yet, and it was already so shocking. If it was used, what kind of scene would it be? Chapter 372. Outside the forest of 1,000 poisons, the myriad Demon Ridge cultivators looked solemn as they waited. Messages kept coming in from all sides, so the myriad Demon Ridge knew Lu Ye's movements like the back of their hand. Senior brother Wu, Lu Ye is already 100 miles away. He'll be here soon. Qin Zheng from the Thousand Feathers sect walked up to a man. The man he addressed as Senior Brother Wu was Wu Beihan, who was ranked 33rd on the Spirit Stream list. He came from a first-grade sect and was much stronger than Qin Zheng. Qin Zheng had led the Hidden Fog Mountains pursuit of Lu Yi, but they had suffered heavy losses and humiliated him and the Thousand Feather sect. Now, the Myriad Demon Ridge had sent out a lot of experts. There were more than 10 Spirit Stream list experts here, so Qin Zheng naturally didn't have the authority to give orders. How many people are with him? Wu Beihan looked in the direction Lu Yi had come from. 100 miles was very close to the core region cultivators. They would probably arrive in less than an incense stick's worth of time. About 300 or 400. Only 300 or 400. Wu Beihan snorted. There's nothing to be afraid of. The Myriad Demon Ridge had gathered 3,000 or 4,000 people here. Although they wanted to surround the forest of 1,000 poisons and had spread out a lot of people, there were still more than 700 people in this direction. The Grand Sky Alliance had only sent 300 or 400 people, so it was undoubtedly suicidal. Qin Zheng wanted to remind Wu Beihan not to underestimate the enemy, but on second thought, he realized that the difference in numbers between them and the enemy was close to double. It was impossible for the Myriad Demons Ridge to lose this battle no matter what. Thus, he did not say anything, lest he be ridiculed for being a coward. Because of the hidden Fog Mountain's defeat, he had been blamed by many people openly and secretly. They said that it was his mistake that caused the myriad Demon Ridge to suffer heavy losses and lose face. But in fact, in such an environment, he had been ordered to do so. How could he have made a good decision? The entire hidden Fog Mountain was almost led by the nose by Lu Yi. Wu Beihan was undoubtedly a steady person. Even if his side had the advantage in numbers and said there was nothing to be afraid of, he still carefully ordered people to check the surrounding arrangements. They had set up many formations in this area. Some people had even bought spirit tools from the Tianji treasure house to capture people. It was a spirit tool that looked like a large net. It required several people to work together to cast it. It was usually used to capture some large and troublesome demonic beasts. Every spirit net was extremely valuable, but in order to deal with Lu Ye, the myriad Demon Ridge had bought over a dozen spirit nets. If Lu Ye didn't show up, then it would be fine, but if he did, then he wouldn't be able to escape. Wu Beihan then looked at a certain spot in the crowd. There was a small cultivator with an ordinary appearance. He was the type that no one would look at if he was thrown into a crowd. The spirit light on the surface of his body was only at the heavenly 8 level. However, very few of the cultivators from the Myriad Devil's Ridge knew that this person was a ghost cultivator ranked 9th on the spirit stream list, Ghost Shadow. It was no secret that Lu Yi had been able to kill a Heaven rank 9 cultivator with his Heaven rank 7 cultivation base. Thus, if they really wanted to deal with Lu Yi, the ghost cultivator's ambush would undoubtedly be a sharp blade to look forward to. And as the strongest ghost cultivator in the spirit stream battlefield, Ghost Shadow's arrival filled Wu Beihan with confidence in this operation. Everything was ready. Hundreds of cultivators held their breaths, waiting for the people of Haotian Alliance to show up. Time passed. Until a certain moment, someone whispered, "They're here." At the end of their field of vision, a large number of flowing lights rushed over. They were the cultivators of Haotian Alliance who were escorting Lu Yi. Leading them were more than a dozen sword cultivators from the Beixian sword sect. The Myriad Devil's Ridge was in an uproar. Hundreds of cultivators from Haotian Alliance brazenly rushed over, which undoubtedly made them feel underestimated. At the same time, they were puzzled. What was Haotian Alliance trying to do? These people were all cultivators from the core circle. There was no reason for them to be so stupid. In the distance, in the Haotian Alliance's camp, Yu Lianzhou looked in the direction of the myriad poison forest and said in a deep voice, "Brother Lu, there are still 20 miles left." Got it. Lu Yi, who had been sitting cross-legged behind Yu Lianzhou, slowly stood up and said in a clear voice, "Brother Lu, thank you for protecting me along the way. Leave the rest to me. Please act according to the situation." A cultivator from Tianjiu laughed. "Brother Yi, I don't know what you're going to do, but the Myriad Devil's Ridge is very powerful now. It'll be difficult for you to do it alone. Since we're here, we're not afraid to go with you. However, I'll say this first. If you can't do it, you still have to run. Where there's life, there's hope, Brother Yi." "Yes, yes, yes. 10 miles. Yu Lianzhou shouted. From his position, he could already feel the spiritual power fluctuations from the cultivators of the Myriad Devil's Ridge. Lu Yi summoned his spirit boat and jumped down from Yu Lianzhou's flying sword. As he raised his hand and drank a bottle of resting fruit wine that he had prepared, the spirit boat shook slightly and rushed to the front. In the next instant, under the gazes of thousands of people from both sides, Lu Ye's body was suddenly shrouded by a dark red spiritual power. Rich spiritual power flowed, gushed, and gathered, turning into the shape of an egg and tightly wrapped around Lu Yi. Violent spiritual power fluctuations spread in all directions. On the surface of the egg, various mysterious patterns rapidly evolved, dazzling the eyes. The group of people from the Grand Sky Alliance had long felt that Lu Yi was holding back some powerful technique. At this moment, they naturally opened their eyes wide to see clearly. However, they were confused, because no one could see what Lu Yi was doing. Similarly, the cultivators of the Myriad Devil's Ridge were confused. Lu Yi suddenly rushed out and used his spiritual power to condense into the shape of an egg. His entire body was hiding inside. Looking at his posture, it seemed like he wanted to force his way out. But so what if he protected himself so tightly? With more than 700 cultivators from the core circle attacking together, even a true lake-stage cultivator would have to think twice. The tide-like spiritual power crazily surged. The patterns on the spirit energy egg that wrapped around Lu Yi became increasingly clear and flashed with a dazzling luster. The spiritual power stored in the spirit storage rune on his chest was completely consumed in less than 3 breaths of time. Then, it was the spiritual power stored in the second spirit storage rune, followed by the spiritual power stored in the other spirit storage runes, and finally, the spiritual power flowing in Lu Ye's spirit apertures. There had never been a time when Lu Ye's spiritual power consumption was so severe. Outsiders could only see the various changes on the surface of the spirit energy egg, but in reality, there were even more changes inside the spirit energy egg. The fragments of spirit runes contained in 1 or 200 talent tree leaves were constructed by Lu Yi in an extremely short period of time using a huge amount of spiritual power and then pieced together. Not only did it consume spiritual power, it also consumed the power of the mind. The Grand Heaven Alliance cultivators behind Lu Yi were the first to sense that something was wrong because the spirit energy egg that wrapped around Lu Yi was emitting an extremely dangerous aura that made their skin prickle. Under Lianzhou's lead, the Grand Heaven Alliance cultivators, who originally planned to charge into the myriad poison forest with Lu Yi, stopped in their tracks. The corners of their eyes twitched as they stared at the spiritual power egg that was rapidly approaching the myriad Devil's Ridge's camp. They didn't dare to continue following. Although they didn't see what technique Lu Yi was using, it was obviously a very powerful and dangerous technique. Once it was used, it was very likely that they would be accidentally injured. Thinking back to what Lu Yi said before, the Grand Heaven Alliance cultivators finally understood where his confidence came from. At this moment, they were only 3 miles away from the myriad Devil Ridge cultivators. Even so, they were rapidly closing in. The myriad Devil Ridge cultivators finally realized that something was wrong because the surface of the approaching spirit energy egg was scorching red as if it was about to explode. Even though they were a few miles away, the terrifying aura made their hair stand on end. Wu Beihan stared fixedly at the spirit energy egg. The surging warning in his heart told him to escape from this place as soon as possible, but his dignity as a cultivator made him unable to move. Hundreds of people were facing one person. If he escaped like this, what would happen? He didn't notice that Ghost Shadow, who was in the crowd, had already concealed himself and ran somewhere. A powerful ghost cultivator like Ghost Shadow was extremely sensitive to danger. The horror of an impending disaster made him not dare to stay here any longer. 1 mile, 1 mile, Wu Beihan shouted angrily, "Kill!" As soon as he finished speaking, many formations were activated. Spells and artifacts blotted out the sky and covered the earth as they bombarded the oncoming spiritual energy eggs. Not only that, but there were also cultivators who flew into the sky on their artifacts, and many spiritual nets flew towards the spiritual energy eggs. Kacha, cracks appeared on the surface of the scorching red spirit energy egg. The moment it shattered, a clear and loud cry suddenly resounded through the world. Orange flames swept in all directions, and a huge firebird appeared out of thin air. The firebird was more than 30 meters long, with long feathers trailing behind it. Its wingspan was nearly 60 meters. Its posture was graceful, and its expression was vivid. The patterns of feathers covering its body were clearly visible, as if it was a living creature. Its wings flapped, and everywhere it passed, the space was scorched and distorted. Many attacking spells hit its body, but they were like stones sinking into the sea. Many flying artifacts lost their spirituality in an instant, and their restrictions were all destroyed. They melted and fell to the ground. The dozen or so spirit nets that covered it couldn't stop its graceful movements. On this day, a divine bird appeared, and the world was shocked. All the cultivators who saw this scene looked at the huge firebird with dazed and trembling eyes. "The 4 sacred beasts, Vermilion Bird," Yu Lianzhou murmured. Even though he was an extremely outstanding sword cultivator, his sword heart was shaken at this moment, and his scalp was numb. He had only read about the 4 sacred beasts in the sex records, but he had never seen it with his own eyes. Today, he saw it with his own eyes. He felt a lingering fear. If he hadn't reacted quickly and stopped following Lu Yi, his side would have suffered heavy losses when the vermilion bird appeared. Not only him, but all the cultivators from the Grand Heaven Alliance were also terrified. They all guessed that Lu Yi was going to use a powerful technique, but now they knew that it was too powerful. Moreover, what technique was this? Even the 4 sacred beasts were summoned. Of course, everyone knew that these weren't the real 4 sacred beasts. The real 4 sacred beasts would probably only need to flap their wings to destroy the entire spirit stream battlefield. These were only condensed by Lu Yi with his own spiritual power. The key question was, could a spirit stream cultivator use such a technique? Chapter 373. More than 7 million cultivators from the Devil Ridge's core region were gathered in this direction. There were many formations and spirit weapons in the sky and on the ground, sealing the area tightly. Such a line of defense could not be said to be weak. However, when the vermilion bird's figure swept past, this solid line of defense was easily torn apart like paper. The cultivators from the Devil Ridge who were pulling the spirit net to cover the vermilion bird were the first to bear the brunt. Before they could completely get close, their clothes and hair were burned, and their protective spirit power did not have the slightest effect. At this moment, they finally realized that a great disaster was about to befall them. They wanted to turn around and run, but it was already too late. The vermilion bird's wings flapped slightly, and its slender and elegant figure crossed the barrier of space, enveloping them in orange-red flames. Screams rang out, and figures fell down like raindrops, dying on the spot before they completely landed. More and more cultivators from the Devil Ridge were engulfed by the orange-red flames. Even the powerful cultivators on the Spirit Stream list were as weak as ants in front of such means. The dense formation was originally to better deal with the charging formation of the Grand Sky Alliance, but at this moment, it became the biggest failure. The vermilion bird's figure swept past the most concentrated place of the crowd, and the scorching power plowed out a death zone in the air and on the ground as it crashed into the forest of 1,000 poisons. Its power did not diminish, and the poisonous miasma that pervaded the forest of 1,000 poisons all year round was cleared out. Wherever the vermilion bird passed, the poisonous miasma disappeared without a trace. Looking down from the sky, outside the forest of 1,000 poisons, the originally tight line of defense of the Devil Ridge now had a gap that was hundreds of feet wide. There was no one in the gap, and on both sides of the gap were the horrified cultivators of the Devil Ridge. Pairs of eyes trembled as they looked at the orange-red figure that crashed into the forest of 1,000 poisons. They were able to survive not because they were strong enough, but because they were lucky enough not to be affected by the huge figure. As for the myriad Demon's Ridge cultivators who were affected, all of them were charred black and had lost all their vitality. In just a dozen breaths of time, more than 200 cultivators of the Devil Ridge had been killed or injured. Even a few cultivators on the Spirit Stream list had died, including Wu Beihan, who was ranked 33rd. After all, he was the strongest person on the surface, so the moment the vermilion bird appeared, he did not choose to hide or escape. Instead, he ordered the cultivators around him to attack. However, he underestimated the strength of the Fire Phoenix. When the orange figure rushed in front of him, it was already too late to run. He left peacefully. The clear and resonant cry rang out once again. After the vermilion bird crashed into the myriad poisons forest for several miles, it suddenly collapsed and turned into specks of fluorescent light. Amidst the dancing fluorescent lights in the sky, a figure fell straight down. "It's Lu Yi," a myriad Devil Ridge cultivator exclaimed in a trembling voice. The vermilion bird of the 4 sacred beasts was created by Lu Yi. Now that the vermilion bird was gone, Lu Yi's figure was naturally revealed. But looking at his current situation, it seemed he wasn't doing very well. "He's not going to make it," someone shouted in surprise. More than 200 cultivators from the core circle of Myriad Demon's Ridge were killed by such a shocking method. Specks of red light drifted out of the corpses and converged into a belt of light, drifting towards the place where Lu Yi landed. But was this really something that a spirit stream stage cultivator could casually use? At this level of cultivation, who didn't understand the principle that the stronger the means, the greater the price? Although they didn't know why Lu Ye was able to use such a method, he was undoubtedly an arrow at the end of its flight. Perhaps he had even suffered a great backlash. Right now, he was definitely at his weakest. This could be seen from his sorry figure falling down. The boundless fear just now was suddenly replaced by great surprise. All the myriad demons' ridge cultivators saw that this was an opportunity. A chance to kill Lu Yi. Lu Yi of the Jade Blood Sect was a moving treasure trove. Whoever killed him would be able to enjoy endless wealth in the future. Therefore, after a short pause, all the surviving myriad demons' ridge cultivators became excited. However, before they could rush into the myriad poisons forest to search for Lu Yi, the sound of swords suddenly rang out. Someone shouted, "The Grand Heaven Alliance is here." The myriad demons' ridge cultivators who were attracted by Lu Yi turned their heads to look. More than 10 sword lunatics from the North Profound Sword Sect formed a sword formation. Their flying swords were like dragons as they attacked this side. Behind these sword lunatics were 300 to 400 Grand Heaven Alliance cultivators. The appearance of the vermilion bird was indeed shocking. However, the Grand Heaven Alliance wasn't the one being attacked after all. Therefore, they came back to their senses before the myriad demons' ridge. Yu Lianzhou and the others immediately realized that this was a good opportunity to attack the myriad demons' ridge. When the vermilion bird's figure crashed into the myriad poisons forest, they launched an attack on the panicked enemy. A huge battle suddenly broke out. There were thousands of myriad demons' ridge cultivators gathered inside and outside the myriad poisons forest. There were more than 700 people in this direction. Even though some of them had died just now, the myriad demons' ridge still had the advantage in terms of numbers. However, sword cultivators were the best at killing. Especially when more than 10 sword cultivators formed a huge sword formation, their killing power increased greatly. The sword dragon formed by thousands of flying swords crashed into the crowd and immediately turned into a sharp weapon that minced flesh. Screams rose and fell continuously as blood and broken limbs flew everywhere. Immediately after this sword formation, more than 300 Grand Heaven Alliance cultivators used various methods to kill the myriad demons' ridge cultivators. If the previous arrangements were still there, the myriad demons' ridge could still rely on them to turn the situation around. However, when the vermilion bird's figure swept past this area, all the arrays and methods set up in advance were destroyed. At this moment, the only thing the myriad demons' ridge could rely on was their advantage in numbers. This small advantage couldn't stop the Grand Heaven Alliance's attack at all. Under the pressure, the myriad demons' ridge couldn't resist for a while. It wasn't until a group of cultivators heard the commotion and came to help that the momentum of the Grand Heaven Alliance's attack was stopped. The hundreds of people from the Grand Heaven Alliance didn't linger in the battle. After taking advantage of the situation, they immediately ran away. The myriad demons' ridge chased after them vigorously. Just as the two sides were fighting, Lu Yi was dashing in the myriad poisons forest with blood all over his body. His aura was weak. He only felt that his consciousness was blurry at this moment. He was exhausted, and his spiritual power was almost dried up. If he hadn't drunk a bottle of resting fruit wine before using the fire phoenix, he would have been exhausted. Countless wounds appeared on his skin, and even the flesh inside his body was damaged. He secretly rejoiced. Fortunately, he had stored a lot of spiritual power with the 5 spirit storage spirit runes. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been able to use the fire phoenix this time. This spirit rune was too taxing on his spiritual power and mind. It wasn't something a cultivator of his level could use. Although he successfully used it in the end, the fire phoenix constructed wasn't under his control at all. Otherwise, he wouldn't have rushed into the myriad poisons forest and would have killed the hundreds of myriad demons' ridge cultivators there. Not long after he crashed into the myriad poisons forest, the fire phoenix collapsed. It wasn't that its power was exhausted, but that he couldn't hold on anymore. If he held on any longer, Lu Yi felt that he would die. If he wanted to easily construct this huge spirit rune and control it perfectly, Lu Yi estimated that he would have to reach the Cloud River realm for it to be possible, but it was just a possibility. The resting fruit wine continued to work, and the spiritual power he consumed was quickly replenished. However, the aftereffects of using the fire phoenix were quickly showing. He didn't dare to stay in place because there were traces of Myriad Demon's ridge cultivators in the Myriad Poisons forest. His figure was so obvious when he fell just now, so someone must have come to find him. If he encountered a cultivator from the Myriad Demon's ridge at this time, Lu Yi estimated that he wouldn't have a good ending. The strength he could display now would be greatly reduced. Fortunately, he had already sent a message to Yi in advance, and Yi was guiding the giant armor toward him. Moreover, the Myriad Poisons forest was filled with poisonous miasma, blocking one's vision. It wouldn't be easy for the cultivators from the Myriad Demon's Ridge to find him in such an environment. As long as he was careful enough, there shouldn't be too much of a problem. Just as he was thinking about this, a heavenly secret suddenly descended from the heavens. Following that, a huge translucent list appeared in the sky above his head. The list was engraved with the names and backgrounds of 100 people. It was the famous Spirit Stream list. Lu Yi, who was running away, stiffened. The situation didn't seem too good. Lu Yi naturally had some understanding of the Spirit Stream list. According to her fourth senior brother, cultivators who made it onto the Spirit Stream list for the first time would be able to sense the omnipresent fate of heaven. If one's performance was outstanding enough, the fate of heaven would have a unique way of highlighting the person who made it onto the list. It could be considered a form of recognition and reward from the fate of heaven. However, since ancient times, there weren't many people who were truly recognized and rewarded by the heavenly secret. According to the proportion of people on the list, it was 1 in 10,000. Such a person would only appear once every few years. While Lu Yi was still thinking about carefully concealing his whereabouts, the translucent spiritual stream list suddenly unfurled above his head like a flag. As long as one was not blind, they should be able to see the list within a radius of 100 miles. It couldn't be. How could it be? Under the gazes of countless people, 5 names on the Spirit Stream list suddenly dimmed, before turning into fluorescent light and dissipating. This meant that these 5 people had either advanced to the Cloud River realm or died. At the 33rd position, a row of golden words suddenly appeared. Lu Yi, Force Province's Jade Blood Sect, 7th Order Heaven Grade. Immediately after that, everyone below the 33rd position was moved up by 1 position. At the empty position at the end of the list, there were a few more lines of words, indicating the names, origins, and cultivation of the new people on the list. The huge Spirit Stream list hung high in the sky. At this moment, all the cultivators within 100 kilometers could clearly see it. Everyone's eyes were fixed on the 33rd row of words, especially the last 5 words. 7th Order Heaven Grade. How dazzling! Since ancient times, the masters on the Spirit Stream list were all at the 9th Order Heaven Grade. Only in the past decade or so did Li Baxian appear, occupying the top 10 positions with his 8th Order Heaven Grade cultivation. However, Li Baxian was different. He had fallen from the 9th Order Heaven Grade. Even if he had opened a spirit aperture, his foundation was still there. Furthermore, his talent was extraordinary, allowing him to control 100 swords. Even the Northern Profound Sword Sect's sword master had thought of accepting him as a disciple. Tian Chi's cultivation being on the Spirit Stream list was unprecedented. Chapter 374. The Spirit Stream list was a list created by the mysteries of the heavens. There were countless cultivators in the Spirit Stream battlefield, but the list only had 100 names. One could imagine how difficult it was to get onto the list. After so many years, the cultivators of the 9 prefectures had long since figured out the rules of the Spirit Stream list. There were 2 ways to get onto the list. The first way was to fight in front of others and display one's strength. If one's strength was strong enough, they would be included in the Spirit Stream list and be placed in a suitable position. Therefore, as long as one's strength was strong enough, they would definitely be able to get onto the list. Of course, if a cultivator wanted to hide their strength and never show it in front of others, even if they had the qualifications, the list would not include them. Take Li Baxin as an example. When Lu Yi first met him, he was ranked 10th on the spirit stream list. At that time, he had been hiding his strength, as he had never shown it in front of others. It was only after the battle at the Golden Light Summit, when he had agreed to fight with Yan Xing, that he had revealed his strength. The spirit stream list had been adjusted in time, moving him from 10th place to 3rd place. Previously, when Li Baxin's spiritual aperture had been completely repaired, he had used his Tianjiu cultivation to kill Yan Xing outside the Wild Blade Sect's encampment. Thus, he had jumped from 3rd place to 1st place. According to the mysteries of the heavens, the strength he had displayed had already surpassed Feng Yuechen's. The other way was to challenge those on the spirit stream list. The mysteries of the heavens had a set of rules and methods for challenges. If those who were not on the list succeeded in their challenge or killed their opponents, they would replace those on the list. There were many benefits for cultivators who got onto the spirit stream list. Those benefits were bestowed by the mysteries of the heavens and were extremely beneficial to their cultivation. It was because of those benefits that many cultivators with strong foundations were unwilling to reach the Cloud River realm, even if they had a Tianjiu cultivation. They stayed in the spirit stream battlefield mainly for the spirit stream list. If they could get onto the spirit stream list and obtain the benefits bestowed by the mysteries of the heavens before reaching the Cloud River realm, their future potential would be even greater. When cultivators reached Tianjiu cultivation, the difference in their foundations would slowly be revealed. Even cultivators with the same cultivation base would have differences in strength. Lu Yi had killed quite a few Heaven Tier 9 cultivators recently. However, if he were to face off against an expert on the spirit stream list, it was hard to say who would emerge victorious. That was because the power he had displayed so far was not enough for him to enter the spirit stream list. That was Heavencraft's fair judgment. Until now, the Fire Phoenix had killed over 200 cultivators from the Myriad Devil Ridge in one fell swoop. Among them, there were as many as 5 people on the spirit stream list. The one with the highest ranking was Wu Beihan, who was ranked 33rd. According to the rules of the spirit stream list, Lu Yi had killed Wu Beihan, so it didn't matter what method he had used to take his place. In truth, the terrifying power displayed by the Fire Phoenix was something that even the number 1 person on the spirit stream list would not be able to take on. Logically speaking, Lu Yi should have been able to reach the number 1 spot on the spirit stream list. But Tianji's judgment had its own set of criteria. Perhaps he felt that Lu Ye's method was opportunistic, so he only allowed him to take Wu Beihan's place. After all, under normal circumstances, Lu Yi wouldn't have the chance to use this spirit pattern in a fight. He wouldn't even have enough spirit energy, so how could he use it? The reason why he was able to cast it successfully this time was because he had prepared ahead of time. He had used 2 spirit storage spirit inscriptions to store 60% of his spirit energy in advance. When he was in a real battle, he would not have the time to do such things. At this very moment, on the huge list, there was a Heaven Grade 9th Master mixed in with a Heaven Grade 7th Master. Furthermore, he occupied the 33rd position, shining so brightly that it almost blinded the eyes of cultivators from both sides. No one had ever been able to rank so high on the spirit stream list. The majority of cultivators had climbed up from the bottom of the spirit stream list step by step. Something unprecedented had happened right before everyone's eyes. This matter was quickly spread to the 9 continents through various cultivators' messages. In just a short moment, all the cultivators in the 9 continents knew about this matter. The 9 continents were shaken. Not only was Lu Yi, with his Heaven Grade 7th Master cultivation, able to reach the 33rd position on the spirit stream list, they were even more shocked by the terrifying method he had used. No one knew how he had done it, but he had actually summoned the Vermilion Bird, one of the 4 divine beasts, and killed over 200 people from the Myriad Demon's Ridge in one fell swoop. At this moment, Lu Yi had an unspeakable bitterness. Originally, the Myriad Poisons forest was filled with poisonous miasma. The moment he fell, he had started to flee. With his powerful perception, as well as the concealment bracelet and concealment spirit inscriptions, as long as his luck wasn't too bad, he basically didn't have to worry about being discovered by the people from the Myriad Demon's Ridge. However, the spirit stream list was like a huge flag that suddenly fluttered above his head. The flag accurately pointed out Lu Ye's location to the cultivators from the Myriad Demons Ridge. In an instant, the cultivators who were originally aimlessly searching for traces of Lu Ye started to move towards the spirit stream list direction. Lu Ye's mouth was filled with bitterness. What made him even more angry was the fact that his name was displayed on the spirit stream list. Even Heaven's Secret had determined that his name was Lu Yi. His name was clearly Lu Yi. Bastard Lashan, just you wait. Dragging his exhausted body, Lu Yi forced himself to stay alert and hurriedly entered the depths of the Myriad Poisons forest. The omnipresent poisonous miasma might be a problem for other cultivators, but for Lu Yi, it wasn't a threat at all. As long as he had enough fuel stored in his innate skill tree, all the poison that had invaded his body would be burned clean. Relying on his powerful perception, Lu Yi was often able to detect the other cultivators from the Myriad Demons Ridge before they were searching for him. Furthermore, the Myriad Poisons forest was obstructed by vision. As far as the eye could see, the entire Myriad Poisons forest was filled with all kinds of bright colors. Those colors condensed into poisonous fog and miasma that drifted aimlessly within the Myriad Poisons forest. Lu Yi was already wearing the Vanishing Bracelet. Once he sensed someone nearby, he would immediately activate the Vanishing Bracelet's power to conceal himself. The spirit artifact that Madame Yun had bestowed upon him was of great help at this time. Although Lu Ye's spirit chi was rapidly recovering, it was best to not consume it at this time. The amount of spirit chi required to activate the Vanishing Bracelet was much less than that required to activate the Concealment Spirit Rune. Furthermore, the concealment effect of this spirit artifact was more outstanding than that of the Concealment Spirit Rune. There were constantly cultivators from the Myriad Demons Ridge passing by, searching in all directions. Only after they left did Lu Yi continue to flee. He walked and stopped. Suddenly, Lu Yi felt a great sense of danger. He hurriedly stopped and concealed his whereabouts. The surroundings were quiet, and there were no signs of the Myriad Demons Ridge cultivators searching for him. Lu Yi frowned. He originally thought that he was hallucinating. Just as he was about to remove the power of the Vanishing Bracelet, that sense of danger appeared out of nowhere again. He stood in place, held his breath, and carefully looked around. His perception, which was far beyond that of a Spirit Stream Realm cultivator, played a crucial role at this moment. Lu Yi felt a faint flow of vitality not far from him. There was someone in that position. Furthermore, to be able to conceal his aura and figure to such an extent, it was obviously an extremely powerful ghost cultivator. He quietly activated the Insight Spirit Rune to enhance his eyes. As expected, he saw traces of a human-shaped spirit chi flowing in that position. The ghost cultivator seemed to have sensed something. He hid his figure and wandered nearby. After a while, he actually walked to a spot not far from Lu Yi. The two people who had concealed themselves were less than 30 feet apart from each other, sizing each other up. The spirit chi flowing in the ghost cultivator's body suddenly sped up. Lu Yi immediately determined that the other party was about to make a move. It wasn't that the ghost cultivator had sensed his presence. The ghost cultivator opposite him was probably just trying it out. A clanging sound rang out, and the weapon box at Lu Ye's waist shot out 9 streams of light. Since he realized that the ghost cultivator was about to make a move, Lu Yi naturally wouldn't foolishly wait. The ghost cultivator who had yet to make a move was clearly startled. He hurriedly revealed himself, revealing an ordinary face. It was Ghost Shadow, who was ranked 9th on the Spirit Stream list. As his spirit chi surged, the short blade in Ghost Shadow's hand turned into an afterimage. A series of clanging sounds rang out as the 9 Imperial weapons were blocked. When he looked up again, Lu Yi had already soared into the sky on his weapon. Ghost Shadow flew into a rage. This was the first time his whereabouts had been discovered while he was hiding. He didn't know how Lu Yi had done it, but it was something that no ghost cultivator could accept. Without any delay, he summoned his flying spirit tool and chased after him. At the same time, shouts came from all directions. Lu Yi is here. The myriad Devil Ridge cultivators who were searching for Lu Yi in the air had discovered him. In an instant, The scene became lively as one figure after another chased after Lu Yi, attacking him with flying spirit tools and spells from afar. Lu Yi had no choice but to use his spirit tool to dodge the attacks. He went all the way into the depths of the myriad poisons forest. Not long after, he encountered a stream of light. Lu Yi looked over and saw a broad figure standing on top of the flying spirit tool. The figure's body was covered in a green spirit chi. It was obvious that he had been poisoned. A white tiger was lying on his shoulder. Giant armor. Lu Yi had contacted Yi earlier, wanting them to come and help him. Now that his whereabouts had been exposed, Giant armor didn't need to hide anymore. The two sides quickly met. Lu Yi jumped onto Giant armor's flying spirit tool. Giant armor immediately turned around and rushed into the depths of the myriad poisons forest. A large number of streams of light chased after him. However, as the chase went on, some people found it difficult to continue. In this damned myriad poisons forest, the deeper one went, the stronger the toxicity of the poisonous miasma. Chapter 375. With a crash, the branches broke and two figures fell to the ground. Yi hurriedly appeared and used her spirit energy to support Lu Yi and Giant armor. Only then did they land steadily. Lu Yi's vision was filled with double images and he saw stars. The aftereffects of using the fire phoenix had already been revealed. Although his spirit energy was gradually recovering under the effect of the fruit wine, the burden of using such a large spirit pattern could not be easily erased. He had been chased by the people of Myriad Demon Ridge and could not rest for a while. At this moment, his skin was cracked and covered in blood, looking extremely shocking. Lu Yi, are you okay? Yi's voice had a trace of sobbing. Apart from the time she brought Lu Yi to Ing Mountain to find Hua Si to save his life, she had not seen Lu Yi so miserable in a long time. Lu Yi waved his hand and took a deep breath. He took out a bottle of royal jelly from his storage bag and handed it to Yi. Let Giant armor drink this. Giant armor was heavily poisoned and had to be treated quickly. Yi had said that the ordinary honey they brought from Hidden Fog Mountain had some detoxification effect, so this royal jelly definitely had it as well, and the effect was even better. While Yi was feeding Giant armor the royal jelly, Lu Yi forced himself to set up a formation. This place was already considered the depths of myriad poison forest. The poisonous miasma around them was fierce. He had the talent tree to burn pill poison. As long as he had enough fuel, he could be immune to poison. However, Giant armor and Yi could not. Without the protection of the formation, they would be poisoned to death before long. Array flags flew out one after another, and soon, a simple protective array was arranged into a framework. Lu Yi then directed Yi to place enough spirit stones in the appropriate positions, and finally placed the array flag that controlled the array at the core. The formation was activated and a curtain of light surged out, enveloping the place where they were, forming a semicircle of about 10 feet. This was not the end. Lu Yi also constructed a spirit-gathering spirit pattern on his spirit cavities. He did not need to use the spirit pattern to recover his spirit energy, but to absorb the poisonous miasma in the formation. Only then could the formation be considered safe. With Lu Yi's current cultivation, constructing a spirit-gathering spirit pattern was very simple. A moment later, under the guidance of the spirit-gathering spirit runes, the green mist visible to the naked eye poured into Lu Yi's body. The environment inside the formation was quickly improved, and the area that was originally filled with poisonous mist gradually became clear. Lu Yi looked at Giant armor's situation and found that the royal jelly's detoxification effect was good. The green on Giant armor's body had become much lighter. He gave the storage bag containing the royal jelly and good honey to Yi, who could also take a bottle of the jelly. The rest can be used to detoxify the poison. You take care of it. I need to rest. Yi quickly nodded and looked at Lu Yi again, only to see that he had already fallen asleep with his head lowered. The myriad demons Ridge's sides celebrated. It was not easy. This star of calamity was finally at the end of his road. Thinking back, ever since Lu Yi's identity as a disciple of the Blue Blood sect had been exposed, he had stirred up a storm in the Spirit Stream battlefield. The initial battle on Golden Light Peak had been a big one, but the cultivation of the people who had fought Lu Yi at that time had not been very high. In the eyes of true masters, they had been nothing more than children playing house. However, as his cultivation grew, the threat he posed to Myriad Devil Ridge also grew. In the outer circle, the forces of Myriad Devil Ridge next to the Blue Blood sect were suppressed to the point that they could not raise their heads. The cultivators of the various sects hid in their own bases all year round, not daring to show their faces. There were even 2 forces of Myriad Devil Ridge that had not been able to rebuild their bases. Within a radius of a few hundred miles, the Blue Blood sect could be said to have the absolute advantage. When this fellow entered the inner circle, he became even more impressive. He used some unimaginable means to break the great defensive formation and attack other forces' bases. Especially after he returned from the Sky Expanse sect who was proficient in formation Dao, he quickly formed a Grand Sky Alliance army. Wherever they went, they were unstoppable. More than 100 forces from the Myriad Devil Ridge suffered because of this. The suffering was so deep that the people from the Myriad Devil Ridge complained and their expressions changed. In the end, this matter became so serious that both sides had to send out Divine Sea Realm cultivators to negotiate a solution. This was unprecedented. Both the outer circle and the inner circle were in turmoil because of him. Myriad Devil Ridge had suffered so many losses and was full of anger. They were all sharpening their swords. Once he entered the inner circle, they would teach him a lesson. This wish was quickly fulfilled. This guy reached the 7th heaven realm at an extremely fast speed and entered the inner circle. What was the result? The pursuit in the hidden fog mountain ended with the Myriad Devil Ridge losing hundreds of people. In the forest of 1,000 poisons, 200 people were killed by him. 5 on the Spirit Stream list died, including Wu Beihan, who was ranked 33rd. This allowed him to enter the Spirit Stream list with the cultivation of the 7th heaven realm and become the center of attention of the 9 states. This guy was not only a star of calamity, but also the nemesis of Myriad Devil Ridge. Anyone who had anything to do with him would not have a good ending for Myriad Devil Ridge. Thankfully, he had been forced into the depths of the forest of 10,000 poisons. That was a true forbidden zone for cultivators, and one of the most infamous death zones in the Spirit Stream battlefield. It didn't matter how strong you were, you would definitely die if you entered that damned place. How could Myriad Devil Ridge not be happy? The huge losses they had suffered were temporarily forgotten. For Myriad Devil Ridge, as long as they could kill Lu Ye, no matter how big the losses were, they could accept it. This guy's growth was too fast, and his methods were too terrifying. It would be too late if they did not get rid of him before he fully matured. The Spirit Stream list that had appeared in the sky had long since disappeared. However, many cultivators could use their battlefield imprints to check the Spirit Stream list, so it was easy to know whether Lu Ye was still alive or not. They just needed to look at the Spirit Stream list to see if his name was still on it. Back in the Heaven Expanse sect, Lu Ye had faked his death. At that time, Myriad Devil Ridge had believed him and celebrated for a long time. In the end, 2 months later, Lu Ye had come out of seclusion in the Heaven Expanse sect and quickly pulled out a Grand Heaven Alliance army. The forces of Myriad Devil Ridge began to doubt themselves. Now that the Spirit Stream list was there, he could not fake his death even if he wanted to. Moreover, there was news that many people from Grand Heaven Alliance were trying to contact Lu Ye, but they had not received any response. Hearing this news, Myriad Devil Ridge was even more certain that Lu Ye would not live for long. If there was no response, then he must have fainted. Therefore, it would not be long before he died from the poison. In order to prevent him from escaping from the forest of 1,000 poisons, the various forces of Myriad Devil Ridge sent a large number of cultivators over. In a very short time, they had surrounded the forest of 1,000 poisons so tightly that not even a drop of water could pass through. Myriad Devil Ridge cultivators were everywhere. Under such a dense encirclement, even a mosquito would not be able to fly out of the forest of 1,000 poisons. Grand Heaven Alliance had also responded. Led by several large sects from the War Province, they organized a few attacks. However, due to the huge difference in numbers, it was difficult for them to accomplish anything. They could only temporarily retreat and continue to gather more people. However, everyone knew that time was running out. The Forest of 1,000 Poisons was a place where the deeper one went, the more dangerous it became. Lu Yi could not be contacted, and no one knew how long he could last inside. Perhaps in 1 or 2 days, his name would disappear from the spirit stream list. When that happened, it would be the time of his death. At this time, a stream of light flashed past near the core of the Forest of 1,000 Poisons. Wrapped in that stream of light was a voluptuous figure. It was none other than Hua Xi. When she had contacted Lu Yi before, he had told her not to come. Although she had agreed, how could she not go? If she had not obtained the inheritance, she would not have gone, because with her strength, even if she went, she would only cause trouble. However, now that she had obtained all the inheritances in the land of inheritance, and Lu Yi and the others were trapped in the Forest of 1,000 Poisons, there was a place for her to use. At this moment, Hua Xi's face was full of anxiety. Her expression was solemn as she tirelessly tried to contact Lu Yi through her battlefield mark. However, all the messages were like stones sinking into the sea. She had heard about the Forest of 1,000 Poisons on her way here, so at this moment, she was moving at full speed without caring about the cost, just to reach the Forest of 1,000 Poisons as soon as possible. However, even if she had obtained all the inheritances, she was only an ordinary 9th order cultivator. On top of that, she was also a medical cultivator. How fast could her artifact manipulation speed be? Just as she was thinking about this, several streams of light rushed over from not far away and soon arrived in front of her. Hua Xi paused and looked at the newcomers. This place could barely be regarded as the core area, so the difference in strength between the cultivators she encountered was huge. The newcomers had dense auras around their bodies, and their artifact manipulation speed was very fast. It was obvious that they had all converted to heaven-grade secret arts. The leader was a Heaven 8th Order cultivator. This person looked at Hua Xi coldly, then slowly raised his hand to her, the back of his hand glowing with a pale red luster. This method of directly declaring one's faction as soon as they met undoubtedly meant that they did not want to talk nonsense with Hua Xi. If they were on the same side, they would naturally be on good terms with each other, but if they were on the opposite side, they would definitely not show mercy. Hua Xi's 9th order cultivation was obvious at a glance, and these heaven-grade cultivators could easily deal with her. Hua Xi did not raise her hand. She just looked at the newcomers and said indifferently, "I am a medical cultivator." The identity of a medical cultivator was a layer of protection in the Spirit Stream battlefield and even in the entire 9 states. Just like when Lu Yi captured Feng Yu alive. If Feng Yu was not a medical cultivator, even if she knelt down and kowtowed, she would have died without a doubt. The young man who showed his battlefield mark to Hua Xi raised his brow. Words are not proof. As soon as he finished speaking, he raised his hand and sent a stream of light towards Hua Xi. Hua Xi did not dodge, and the stream of light changed direction at the moment it was about to hit her chest, sweeping past her arm. Blood splattered, and a 3-inch long wound appeared on her fair arm. Her flesh and blood curled up. You're tuning in to the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.